We're going to go ahead and start the Public Works Subcommittee meeting. Today is March 22nd, 2022, and it's 1:30 in the afternoon here at the Cloverdale Library. Councilmember Paula and City Manager David Kelly, along with myself, Crosswalk, the chair. So we'll call the meeting to order. We've already done a roll call, public comment. Anyone wishing to address the city council on items that are not on the committee agenda may do so. There's no one in the facility here or online. So we'll just go ahead and breeze through that. Communications, there are none. Approval of the minutes from February 22nd. Councilmember Paula, did you have a chance to look at them?
I did, Mr. Chair, and I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second, and we'll go ahead and unanimously approve those minutes. Next is new items for discussion, and the first item is water supply update and drought response. And David, I guess you've got some good news for us.
Well, I will talk about that in a moment. But first, touching on the agenda item, we continue to participate in the Russian River drought response group, meeting that is being led by the State Water Board. This effort is to really establish a voluntary drought agreement to address, they're not calling it a voluntary conservation agreement, as an alternative to formal curtailment. There are certainly curtailment components of what's being developed so far in terms of a voluntary agreement. The goal is to try to work with all of the stakeholders in the Upper Russian River watershed to come up with a plan that has some flexibility and adaptability in it, that we can all work together as stakeholders in the watershed versus kind of a one-stop approach that the regional board implements for everybody, even though we all have different rights, different users, different purposes for the water that we're diverting. So the effort continues. They're now kind of at the point where there's some kind of subgroups or breakout groups that are leading up different components of this with, for instance, water rights tends to be require a lot of a legal perspective. So it's kind of an area where of course cities and attorneys tend to get involved. And so there's the breakout discussion is really ensuring water rights and share. If I can just add, what's it here? The other breakout groups include developing the actual agreement itself, but then there's also a focus group on reporting. So we're talking about who, because it's really a lot for one person to do all of the groups, and so we're kind of parsing it out. Darren working on the water, reporting, Verdora working on kind of the drought agreement, with Myers Nave working on the water rights issues. So they've set a fairly strict timeline and hopes of developing this agreement to be able to meet the May deadline. And they were actually trying to target getting something done before the end of this month, but it just seems like it's too quick, especially for cities. Maybe individual groups or single water users can agree to things much quicker than we can. But that's been conveyed back to the state board, and they've even said to themselves that, or to the group that we recognize we're kind of trying to fix the airplane as we fly here. Clearly, kind of the background for this is that the drought conditions persist in the watershed. Lake Mendocino is a little bit better off this year than it was last year. Unfortunately, Lake Sonoma is in a worse condition, so we might see some of this, some of the more bigger drought impacts actually in the lower Russian River watershed. We'll see. I don't know if we may be seeing, even though the focus of our efforts have been really kind of the upper Russian River watershed. But I'm going to pause there. Our interim city engineer, she's been working quite a bit hand in hand with Redora on this, and any updates you want to share with the community just on this effort.
And before you do, Vanessa, I'm just going to, if we can, if nobody has any objections, let's just slide number C in with this as well, if that's okay, rather than jump into the Second Street Park and then come back to water resources.
Sure.
Okay.
Apologies for being late. I was out there on your 4th Street project, looking at some stuff there a few minutes ago. The kind of the updates, a draft MOU. So I don't know. Again, I'm sorry for being late.
High level overview.
Instead of agreement, you're talking about it as an MOU for the draft response, voluntary. Anyways, not an agreement, but a memorandum of understanding. And so they're anticipating releasing a draft for March 28th. So they are still on this aggressive path. And so it's likely that you guys will see something come to council probably towards the end of April, the second council meeting in April. I think would be reasonable. They are anticipating actions to happen in April. We do plan to share the agreement with the subcommittee. I think the subcommittee and the council meeting are like 1 day apart, right? No, am I thinking about that right? Yes. And so, you know, we'll already have the agenda items all prepared, but you guys will get kind of a sneak peek at that thing before everybody else does. I think that's it.
Is it more advantageous for us to have it on a joint powers, or is it better off if we had an agreement? Or memo of understanding, I should say.
I think at this point, the state water board is really pushing forward with this sort of agreement level thing by memorandum of understanding.
And I'm glad it's being more collaborative.
Yeah.
More collaborative, and I think they're also, I think with the MOU, they're also trying to make it more of a voluntary, you know, bring it down a level. The agreement is, you know, it just needs to be a different level than an MOU. Totally voluntary, you know, with the goal being that the city will avoid, you know, curtailments in the future.
Sure. The other thing I would like to ask is that it does have something there to talk about things that are beyond the jurisdiction's control. And what comes to mind is fire and a heavy use of water during fire. Should there be a fire? And I really think that's got to be looked at in a different light, because there's certain things you can't control as a jurisdiction. Yet if they kind of lump it together, you're going to be obviously in violation of your own agreement and backpedaling to try to figure out, you know, how do you justify. I mean, we got to be realistic. If there's a fire, they're going to be taking water out of the hydrants. They're going to be using it, and we have no control. You can't say, hey, time out. You've exceeded your use of water. We got to put a stop on it. You know, that's not an option. So
I would imagine that emergency service, if you will, would be outside of this box.
that, I was just hoping they can make some reference to that in the MOU, so we can kind of say it fits the category.
Maybe like
I just don't want to see it silent on that. It needs to acknowledge.
emergency situations to
Yeah.
be looked at separately or case by case.
Yeah, something that kind of brings to light that we recognize there could be unexpected emergencies. Those we will talk separately outside of it.
That makes complete sense. And we've kind of embodied that under the curtailment order. We have, you know, of course, the curtailment risk is very restricted. It's said across the board based on population, 55 gallons per person per day. And that for us means very significant reductions in our water use, almost to the point where it would impact, well, really to the point it does impact our housing. And we filed a petition that enabled us to increase that 55 to 104. But on top of that, we did the work, so it's going to call it to look at the other uses, and one of which was we specifically in writing to the state board identified that we use water, our fire district uses water for fire pressure. So we kind of gives us a little bit more cushion. But that's under this whole curtailment order and process. And so, how we reflect that and then what's now the MOU. And this is changing in real time.
It is.
It's literally, I got the update yesterday afternoon
Right.
from Redora. So some of this.
And so are you guys all tuned into like the 15%?
No, so we haven't talked about, we haven't drilled down yet. Again, it's high level. So anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, and it, again, I'm just kind of getting feedback from Medora. She had another commitment that she couldn't join here today. So we're kind of looking in the middle here, but we're doing kind of a, ideally 15%. We have senior water rights. We definitely want to be good neighbors. I think everybody is interested in being good neighbors, but the reality is that we have senior water rights. And so we would be in the best kind of scenario of the group. I'm not sure what Ukiah's water rights are, but they have it broken down by, water right levels. And so we are, one of the better groups, 1914 rights, 15% reduction, while other groups step up to how much of a reduction. And a lot of them are going to have to supplement their water sources other ways, truck it in from somewhere else, whatever. So 15% is based on the years 2017 to 2019. It's not 15% year after year. It's not 15% of 2020. 2017 to 2019 were average years. And we're looking at the peak demands being May to September. And so what we're looking at, the average per capita use per day is 127 during those periods. And with the 15% reduction, we're looking at 108. Which is very much in line with what our petition was. I think that was at 104.
With the non-consumptive use. It was 104, and I think we got about another 4 or 5.
Oh, I see.
So we're almost right in
I
that
see.
same.
We're kind of in the same, it's shaping out to be about the same.
I think that's really important, and that's something hopefully in the Cloverdale Connect in our newsletter, once this is adopted, really articulate that, because the biggest concern I've heard from residents is we've cut so much, and now you're going to say 15% more or 20% more.
And
that's not what we're
relative.
saying.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's not year after.
Yeah, and that's what I think we really got to be clear. So because people are saying, we've cut. We just can't cut anymore. We got to wash our clothes. We got to take a shower. We have to wash our hands, those kinds of things. And so when we get this adopted, it's important. I think we really articulate what it all
Now,
means.
15% is still significant.
It is,
I mean,
but it's going back.
People need to, form new habits. But yes, it's going back
It's
to
going back.
average water
It's
years
not-
with no.
It's not 15% from last year, which we were at a significant cut already.
Right.
Yeah, that's the piece I just want to kind of make sure people. It's really important.
So it's from 2017.
2017 to 2019, May to September.
Oh, that's right. It's right here.
And so the average during that time is 127 gallons per capita per day.
So Chair, this is, and Councilmember Paul, this is continues to be an evolving process. We are monitoring very closely. Redora participates and she gives very extensive updates. Not only to myself, but to Vanessa as well as our legal team. And then we plug into that. And my goal is to just really track and ensure that we're getting updates to council with your direction so that we can reflect that feedback to the group, the group of stakeholders, but also to be able to bring something forward to council and see if there's some support for this alternative model. It seems like right now this has a little bit more flexibility in it, more probably going to land roughly in the same neighborhood as we were in Gilman. I guess the question is, as the drought continues and then maybe if it gets worse, you know, what does a larger reduction look like? How does that impact us? That's something we'll have to really spell that out as best we can. We've been doing the numbers crunching relative to, you know, our historical water use and how do these numbers impact those numbers, and kind of it's a separate issue, but we're also going to have a conversation with council about is our water shortage emergency. We declared the stage 4, which was a 35% reduction. And the way that was really kind of intended was to look at year before, you know, year over year. And like you said, Councilmember Paul, is we say, you know, we were hitting that target, you know, intermittently, but we were doing pretty good at our water conservation. So to say was 35% on top of last year would be next to impossible, or be very significant. So we kind of got to look now at this model because it also gives us some guidance on how we may want to, what's the appropriate stage, what's the messaging around that, so that we address, you know, folks that done a great job of conserving. We're not saying necessarily save even more, you know, continue to do the things you're doing to save water, and help us meet our targets.
Sure. I don't want to sidetrack us too hard, but her daughter looks like she is in the house and has her hand up.
All right, yeah, here she is. Thank you, Vanessa. Let's Okay, Redora, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Wow, perfect timing. You guys just started on this agenda item.
Well, we've been talking for a few minutes, but that's okay.
Okay. So I'm not quite sure. I joined a little late. I'm not quite sure if the committee has any questions or if you want me to go through any details associated with the water conservation for this upcoming year, and the status of the agreement.
Well, Redora, if you could share with us the timelines that we're kind of, you know, we're dealing with this process. I know that, you know, the hope was to have something in place by the end of March, which you know, was quickly approaching here next week. Whether we can meet that timeline or not, to have at least a draft MOU or draft agreement in place, or not in place, but at least something that can be looked at more closely. I think for Chair Walter and Councilmember Paula, maybe that kind of help give them some perspective on when we're going to bring this forward.
Okay. So the Russian River Drought Response Group Committee is working in smaller groups to develop various components of the agreement, the MOU. And everyone's working towards the deadline of March 28, 2022. That's when they would like to have a draft MOU available for distribution to legal counsel. They're also going to hold a legal briefing, or they call it an attorney's briefing, where the State Water Board and the drought response group will be sharing what the MOU looks like. In April, the draft agreement will be shared with the Public Works Subcommittee for review. And at that meeting, then you may refer it to the City Council if that is what you want to move forward. So the thought is to have perhaps approval to participate in the early May time period, which is still in keeping with what the State Water Board is planning to do. So David, I wasn't sure if you covered the part that State Water Board is anticipating adopting emergency regulations in May. And if there's an emergency regulation for the Russian River region, the State Water Board, knowing that the region is working on this agreement, will have an off-ramp provision so that those participating in the voluntary agreement would not be subject to the emergency regulations.
I did not cover that, Fedora, so I appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to elaborate on that? I think you may have covered it, but is there anything else you want to add?
Nothing else at this time. It sounded like you had already covered what the potential conservation request is for the city. You know, that may still require a little bit of technical analysis, but it could be a good news for the city in terms of you know, compared to what you're doing right now.
Fedora, Councilmember Paula asked if they were considering emergency water in this MOU at all. You know, specifically in the event of a catastrophic wildfire, and you know we're pulling large quantities of water out of the system to fight fire. Is any of that captured in the MOU, or is anybody talking about that?
That is not discussed. That has not been discussed. But it sounds like the status of the upper Russian River and the storage there is in pretty good shape, especially compared to 2020. And there's set aside for emergency water supply. That's just kind of, you know, when they've done the analysis, they've kind of estimated a certain percentage that is just for emergency water supply. So maybe that answers your question, is it emergency water supply accounted for?
Yeah, I think the comment was that it would be nice if there was something referenced in the MOU.
And I can bring that up at the next meeting. The next meeting is on Monday.
Perfect, that would be great.
Yeah, I would, this is Joe Paula, I would appreciate that. I really think it's important that it just make a reference that should there be some type of emergency that which is beyond the jurisdiction's control, that will be taken into consideration somehow. Just reference it.
That's a good point, Joe. I agree with that 100%. So, and I like the approach of an MOU. I just think it's. I think what they're saying is they don't want to get down into the weeds who has every water right and who doesn't. It's just a understanding. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fedora, if there's nothing else, we're going to move on to, we're going to come out of the agenda a little bit. We're going to go to item number C, which is an update on the city grant that we submitted to the water resource. And David, Vanessa.
Sure, I'll start and I'll turn over to Vanessa. I want to say that we have tremendous positive news to share with the subcommittee, that we've been informed by the Department of Water Resources that our drought relief funding application in the amount of $3.05 million was authorized for funding in the full amount.
Full amount.
So that was that was a very, very significant announcement that we received yesterday, and I certainly just want to acknowledge the work that Vanessa and her team did along with Darren in terms of putting that application together. I know it's a lot of work in identifying the projects that we're supposed to be funded. Of course, those funding applications supported by council, and Councilmember Paul worked hard to get letters of support from our representatives, Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Woods. So that never hurts. It's always positive to have that support. And within that funding, there are really kind of 4 key activities that are proposed, which includes new meters, updating our SCADA system, and then really rehabilitating and rehabbing 2 of our existing wells. So those are all critical CIP projects that are enable us to be more effective water managers and also utilize those assets that we already have and to make them more productive. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vanessa. Vanessa, I know you have some of the mechanics and details of this. It'd be interesting to know, some of the things I think that are going to be important for council to understand is kind of timing and the nature of how the grant may work. I'm very familiar that more often than not, these work on kind of a reimbursement basis. So you have to spend the money and then seek reimbursement. And again, it's always great with grants. It's just, again, that becomes a timing issue between when we spend it and when we reimburse it, when it gets reimbursed. We'll need to look at that in the context of the water enterprise fund balance and rate adjustments, because those all kind of come into play because of that timing.
So when you say that, just not to interrupt you, but when to get reimbursed, are we talking 30 days to get your reimbursement? 60 days?
That I don't know.
That's the red tape, Joe.
Yeah,
That's my question here.
Is there a mechanism where we could make an argument that we're a small city and that we don't have that kind of reserve? And can we be front loaded, X dollars and keep a front load? Because not every city has an extra million sitting in the bank to fund something. And so there must be, I would hope they would have at least consider front loading. And of course, we'd have to lay it out and get it back when they get the next disbursement and be able to move in that direction. Can we check into that?
We may know more later this week. So they're supposed to send a formal letter that details some requirements and outlines. And so I think, wait and see what information is in there. Otherwise, if we don't have that answer in that documentation, we can certainly go chase it down. My understanding is that the reimbursement is based on the date of award. And so effective this past Saturday, any funds that the city is spending are subject to reimbursement. And so that's good news. We can go buy some meters tomorrow and start, there are some of these projects that are already in play. And we can start, spending some of this now. Barring what you just said about, money in and money out kind of thing.
Well, the other option too, and again, I don't want to get too far in front of it, but we do have the ARPA money set aside, and we can take maybe $900 million of that and start moving, and then just reimburse that funding as it comes in to get these projects moving.
Well, I'm sure though, if we didn't have the ARPA funds, that we tap into the enterprise fund.
Yeah.
These are not general fund upfront charges.
Right. It's just managing the fund balance that we have and making sure we maintain our reserves and the things that we need to do keep the viability of the system. So, I just want to be cautious that we don't go out and spend $3 million and we're sitting back waiting for reimbursement. Of course, it's also incumbent and staff will have to make sure we're submitting the reimbursement request timely, getting that money back into our coffers that we're spending. And so that it minimizes that potential impact.
And we've also got to keep an eye on kind of milestones and as things progress. The grant funding was contingent on being able to complete projects by 2026, if I remember it correctly. And so, I created a schedule for these projects back calculated from that final deadline. I didn't front load us. And so I gave us the most amount of time that we possibly could for these projects, but time is of the essence.
Yeah, and getting help is hard. Getting material is going to be delays.
And are we, setting, yes, contracting services and going on to competitive bid, design services, there's an RFP going to get issued. These are all things that we can come to play and get looked at.
I would support that when you get the letter, we first try to get the question answered. Can we get front load? Because that would make it more, and then we start moving, ASAP on trying to get projects moving. And if the answer is no, then I would say we need to identify a way to start putting X dollars into the pot and start moving the program, because 2026 is going to come faster than we know.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be done. Yeah, I don't know where the meters come from, but we do know a lot of shelves and a lot of stores are bare because we're having a hard time getting things, and there's delays always. So and with money that's available, there's a lot of agencies that are looking to get things water related, and so we could be in line. You're 6 months out before you can get your meter. It's like 6 months, and really you're at their mercy. So the sooner we start moving, I think the better we're going to.
So if I'm hearing you, Vanessa, the drop dead date to use it or lose it is 2026.
It's in 2026.
And then I guess this is good news. If we back this up with the CIP projects that we have, we just had a rather hefty water rate increase, and I think we've got scheduled in July. Will that take some of the heat off of the rate increases in your estimation, or is it still going to be a hefty rate increase?
Well, I think that's the question we have to do additional analysis to be able to answer. And I think what I've done is reached out to our rate consultant, and with this news on the, I had that conversation around the ARPA money, how it will affect rates. But likewise, looking at the financial model to see, again, when this revenue is anticipated, when the projects were going to be carried out, and we may need to do kind of a mini update, kind of substantial changes to see if that gives us what kind of flexibility, so that if council, for instance, would like to, maybe one of the things council has the authority to do is the council approve the maximum rate increases. So you can't go higher, let's say that going through the Prop 218 process again, certainly would recommend that, but you can go lower, and it's really about saying what are those rate increases that are going to maintain the viability of the enterprise, ensure you meet bond covenants, reserves, but you can also finance these projects. So kind of looking at that big picture, and now I think that I don't know the direct answer to your question, Chair. I think that's where we need to do a little bit more work, and that's where, when are we expecting this revenue going to come in? When are those expenditures going to hit? And that's going to kind of give you a better perspective of what are some of the rate changes you might want to make to accommodate that.
In these projects that we pick, I'm not the expert on that, but I know one of the things that was brought to our attention was that I believe it was 1966 when we built the chlorine tank, and
The chlorine content.
yeah. Why isn't that at the front of the list here? Because it was my understanding that it's old. 1966.
Yeah, I think our chlorine content tank is newer. The one that's out of the plant,
Oh, is it?
I think 66 was, I think was the Cherry Creek. Yeah, the Cherry Creek, it was one of the other tanks. But let me look at that.
Okay.
I'll talk to Darren and, some of the other, we do have, for example, the Cherry Creek feasibility study completed. There's some options there and what they're working on looking at. For example, do we go with one large single tank or do we do multiple tanks? But then we have another tank project. But I thought the existing tank that was up there was one of our older tanks.
I mean, I really think, I mean, what you've got picked out here is great, not that it's low hanging fruit, but we want to be able to get it done by 2026. So we don't want to tertiary water treatment plant started, that would never qualify. But on the skater, I think I'm saying that right. Number 2, I'm reading what the explanation is. But could you break it down into terms for me? It says it's a control of data acquisition. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, so SCADA acronym stands for Supervisory Control Acquisition. Data acquisition.
I think that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
And what it does, Chair, is it actively monitors the system. So it inflows and outflows to your tanks,
Yep.
but it also enables users to have what's otherwise physical control over the valves and the system itself without manually having to go perform those,
Okay.
to go turn them on. And SCADA allows a remote user to do a lot of controls that otherwise require person power to go do it. Even some of the daily checks now require literally one of our water treatment operators to go out and physically inspect it because we don't have that in the SCADA system. So those are kind of things that if you put that in SCADA, it gives the user real-time, the operator real-time information and be able to control. So open a valve, it'll fill up the tank. And so that is really important, especially during emergencies. We have a small team, and also sometimes troubleshooting remotely can be accommodated more efficiently. So it's a tool that water enterprises are putting a lot of emphasis on is their SCADA systems to begin ensure the management is more efficient. You can make changes really quickly, and it's particularly important during emergencies.
Your explanation in your email is actually pretty good, but I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that. And it's almost like at one desk, we can control 7 of the remote sites. Is what you said. So
Right.
Okay.
The other big benefit, as far as drought, the grant application really had to speak to drought and water conservation. And so, the chlorine contact tank doesn't quite fit that criteria in my mind. But, in the sense of the SCADA system, if there's a water main break, you've got to wait until either the operator notices a drop in the tank or somebody calls and reports it. A SCADA system can send that alarm very quickly. And so, as far as water loss from those kind of events, I think that's a huge help.
Right. It's all computer programming. So you'll say if you experience a loss of so many million gallons in a certain time, it alarm, and that there's a leak, and you can actually see sometimes in the system where the leak is in this area. Whereas right now we rely so much on visual or eyes on.
Right. And then, 2 in the morning, that can be kind of problematic. I also think, just forward thinking out into the future, that at some point, the SCADA system for the water system, can also be informed by our smart meters. And so that's going to give another level of just, user adaptability, knowing really where the water's going, and being able to kind of identify, we are getting some water loss in this area that's, being able to dial that stuff in a more timely manner.
And would that tie into the meters,
You know, it won't be a direct tie, but they will be able to inform
Yeah,
each
so
other.
if there's a residence that had a leak that they're not aware of, it would be a red flag would go up and somebody.
Potentially,
Yeah,
yes.
that's important. A lot of times, if there's a break and they don't know it, and it could go on for, months.
Same, not
And it
only-
happens, and
Yeah.
and then they get very upset because they get a bill.
Right.
Plus, there's a lot of water. waste.
Right.
You know, and I mean, it happens on our side of the meter box too, you know, if there's, some kind of a leak in a water lateral or water pipes somewhere, why have those cat tables been growing there for years?
Yeah.
This.
That one green spot.
Like a one green spot, right?
That was what we experienced at Cal Fire. I don't know if you ever saw the wet spot out there.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't realize it was leaky.
Sure. And, that's not unique to Cloverdale. There's green spots all over the place, right?
Well, that's good, very educational. Let me see, red tape, we've already talked about that. The CIP project, wells number 7 and 8, we're gonna get to look at.
Yeah, that's two wells, especially in low water conditions, they tend not to produce very well. They get error entrainment, and that starts to affect our production process. So we can rehabilitate those, maybe go deeper, solve that problem. And whether we can get out of the influence of the Russian, probably not, but yeah.
And speaking directly to the water, water savings there, my understanding is that the air entrainment issue really buggers up the filters. And so the backwashing, I think under regular conditions, it's every few days. And when there's an air entrainment issue, it's a few times a day. And there's, if I remember right, it's 20,000 gallons per backwash. So, annually that can add up.
Sure.
And so there's the water savings.
And are we able to salvage, do we have a process that we can continue to save that water for irrigation purposes when they get back?
We don't have a great system in place, but this last water year, what we did reclaim some of that. That's what we used to fill up our water buggy for our irrigation. And there were other interested parties in utilizing that water, and that was something we explored kind of as we got back more into the rainy season, it kind of dropped off. But I think that's an area where we can look.
Yeah, because I would think if there's a way to store some of that water for future, somehow where the water, instead of where it goes into the, I guess it goes down into the drain out into the river, the Russian River.
Well, it's kind of a pond that's out just north of the plant, and it gets pumped out. Now, some of that does get pulled back into the plant. I mean, certainly it's good water, but otherwise we do lose a lot of it really to evaporation, transpiration, and it does percolate back into the ground. But there are opportunities to look at that water. It's a supply that we can use.
You see a lot of these big tanks, these big storage tanks popping up along, especially on where the venues are nowadays. You see 5 or 6 or 8 of them. I think that, and I'm sure they do what they can to fill them throughout the year, and then they use that through the drop times of the month. And that might be something we might want to try to look at. I think the more of that type of water we can make available for our landscape, because I know, if we could capture the water, we have the ability to go out and water the different trunk through the pot. So I just think that'd be a good thing to do.
I think, I've lost it. No, contractors, maybe if we have a construction company like the Baumgartner property, maybe he has to take his water from there before.
Right.
But by the same token, and not to take this long conversation, that water that we're talking about now is not charged to what we take out of the river, right? Because it hasn't gone through the meter.
So right now, where it falls in our water accounting is under our non-consumptive use. So what happens when we pull water right now from the river, basically everything is pulled via, is pumped, is captured via the master meters on the pumps. So
Okay,
so
so,
we're capturing that, and then we're pushing water out into the system, and we can calculate what we're billing, and so there's a difference.
Yeah.
And so that's the right now kind of falls under the water loss.
Mhm.
And we know a portion of that water loss is what we're using for the backwash. So it's kind of right in the middle of what you're asking about, Vice Mayor, is we're capturing it from we're capturing the water that we're pumping via a meter, but we're not billing for it. So we're right now, we're doing a tremendous amount of monitoring, and more than we've ever done, where we're doing daily reads on everything we pump to monthly analysis of all the data we push out to our customers. And then there's a difference.
so we're saying that 15% reduction, is that on the amount that's pushed out to our customers, or is it on the amount that comes out of the well, the master of the well?
Right now, so it's both. We have to show the state board what we're pulling out and how we're addressing our water reduction requirements. But then when we push out to customers, that's where we say to our customers, reduce your water usage by the amount set by council. So and there is this in between that legitimately we're using in the production process, and some of that water again gets pushed out into the system, goes through fire hydrants and things like that. We're not specifically accounting for, because there's no meter that's being capturing that use. So we're trying to we got to do a better job at all those uses of calculating and trying to address where exactly they're going, because everybody really should be playing their part. Though we recognize, like fire districts use is critical health and safety. We don't think they're wasting anything.
Sure. That's right. Well, again, just not to beat this up, but I really think when we do the backflush, we can capture that water and make it available to the community. I know a lot of people have these big tanks now that they go out and they load them and they keep landscaping. It just seems a shame when we're really in a critical situation and we have that water being, not utilized when people have the ability. I know Hillsburg does that. They can go down with tertiary, they can go down, fill their tanks, they go home and they do their landscape with that water. And so they make that available to the residents. And it would be nice if we could capture that, come up with plans, because I don't see the drop off away. I mean, this is going to be something we're going to be dealing with every year. Some years worse than others, but it's not going to go away. So if we're thinking outside that box, being able to capture all that and having it primarily for the city parks and our own landscape, and making additional water available for those that want to come down during certain hours to fill a tank so they can go home and keep their landscape with that water rather than just have it go away. So I think that would be a good use, a good plan.
Well, we had also talked about maybe diverting some funds to explore dropping the water well at the parks, at the city parks and all, because we wouldn't be, if we got to 3 million, we wouldn't need every dime of the stimulus money for certain projects. So, but that's a conversation at a later date. But again, if there's nothing else to be said on this, I want to thank Vanessa. Without you and your company, I'm not so sure we could accomplish this grant. But I don't mean that in the spirit of waste there. I mean,
No, not at all.
Aaron was a big help. I appreciate that, but I always like them professionals are on top of things, so thank you.
And we do have grant writers. You know, I solicited our grant writing specialists to get this thing going.
And that is going to be, at least my standpoint, I can't speak for the council, but one of our main goals is to have one on staff, especially for the next couple of contracts. Because there's a lot of grant money right now, and we need to be really paying attention. We got a lot of projects, a lot of needs, and if there's a potential to get $500,000 or $1 million to fix anything, we want to go after it, get our share.
And Chair, to your point, Vanessa and her team deserve a lot of credit because Vanessa did bring it to my attention. There's a lot of grants up there. She had the team that was ready to go. Of course, you got a green light, let's go for it. And, council will support it as well. So, it was a full team effort, but you do need experts like Vanessa's team that was able to come to the table and really help do all that paperwork that's required.
This was a really good, solid opportunity. The application was relatively easy. It still took a lot of hours, relative to other processes. This particular one was easy, and it looks to be, it's a lot of grant. It's not, low interest loan. It's grant money. Anyways, this was a good one.
Well, I know there's a lot of them. I shared that from the league, the thing with you our last meeting. I gave it to you, and I hopefully you got a copy of that. Vanessa was laid out all the different things. Do you remember?
Yeah, no, I have it on my desk, so I don't know if I scanned it to you.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, we need to get you a copy of that because I give you a copy that I can get it, but there's 1.2 trillion, a lot of zeros, trillion infrastructure investment for jobs. And it talks about infrastructure, and I mean, if it's in here, and I mentioned it, there's one for roads, which we have a lot of problems with roads, bridges, major projects, safety, water is another one. Talking about the need for tanks, talking about capturing this water, and broadband, resilience, environmental remedies. So there's a lot of money out there, but it's not going to come to us. We have to go to it. So I'll be happy to get you a copy of this, but I think you still have your statement.
Yes, I know.
I'll follow that. I'll get it.
That would be great. I appreciate if you could take a look at it because, again, these are time sensitive. And it's not like, well, we'll get to it in a month or 3 months. We need to get to it like now and get it going.
In generally speaking, shovel-ready projects are more competitive.
Yeah.
And so, through this committee, taking some advanced steps, get some feasibility studies out of the way, do what you can to kind of get these projects to a state where they can be competitive. I think that was a big part of our grant application that was successful. Is the wells that we looked at for a long time. We had lots of studies on that. We had cost estimates that are in the CYP document, and we've got some background that these have been looked at and the feasibility has been determined.
I just want to drop this one last seed because safety is part of the one I just showed you or mentioned, and we have that Pasty Road project going in, and that is a state required based on the fact that so we have a lot of good buzzwords that we can put in there. It's just a state law, this. But now we have a major safety concern, which we do. So this may be an opportunity, and the other one would be for a couple of our major intersections, such as Hillsburg Avenue, and we're going to be talking about that in Cloverdale Boulevard. This is ideal to go after some grant funding to really fix some of these things in a timely manner. So I just say that because it's worth. You have to hire a grant writer to put that case together. But like you said, we got to figure out what we want to do first. And I do know I kicked David some ideas from my standpoint on the Ashley Road. We need lighting for sure. We're going to need definitely some sidewalks. We need bike lanes because there's going to be a lot of kids going in and out of town to go to school, to go to sports events. There's no way to get there unless you walk, and that's a dangerous road. So think safety, I think this might be an opportunity to try to get some funding. But I hate to lose these windows.
Joe, you're absolutely right. And you know, we don't have the staff, much less the time.
Yeah, that's why we need outside, we need to have a person that will say, hey, here's the problem, here's what we need, find the grant, and then they see, well, we got 1 year, do it, get the paperwork, let's start moving. And yeah.
Before we move off this, just one more thought I had. I was under the, I think I heard on the radio that there was something about another dam or reservoir that was going to be built up north. Did I dream that somewhere?
Well, there is discussions of a reservoir called Sites Reservoir. This is along the I-5 corridor. It's in Colusa County. The kind of proposal there is this is to supplement really the state water project. They have some large irrigation districts where they have very large irrigation canals where they have pumps already in the Sacramento River. The idea that's or kind of the analysis what they look at is during periods of high flow to be able to pump additional water using that existing canal system. There's one big one, it's called the Glen Colusa Irrigation Canal, that is not too far from where this reservoir is supposed to be located, and be able to put a connection in, be able to fill the reservoir, Sites Reservoir, during, again, winter months,
Right.
and then meter that water back into the canal and ultimately to the Sacramento River at, through the summer months. So that actually project's been around for over 20 years. It's, I think, as the states continue to grow, it's been kind of sitting there. Even former Governor Brown was a supporter of it. He actually lives really close to it in his home. So it seems to be have some real feasibility. But that's kind of the big. It's actually a reservoir that's for quite a few million gallons.
Well, I thought I heard when it was going to tie into the Lake Mendocino, but I might have been mistaken. A wishful dream or something.
Yeah, it's just on the other side of the coast range.
Yeah. Okay, well, if there's nothing else on that, I think we've taken care of items A.
I did just really
Yes.
quick want to add, the Department of Water Resources noted that this particular program had very high demand, and they received 1.4 billion in requests. They doled out 175 million. We got 3 of it.
Boy, we're lucky.
Yeah, sure, for sure. Then something?
And the county got some. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
be interesting to see how they're going to use it.
And Vice Mayor, the Supervisor Board was interested in doing kind of a joint press release that's showing Sonoma County how we respond. I saw that the mayor was copied on the email. I did respond with, here's what our tasks were that were funded. But I think Supervisor Board was looking to get a quote. I think he included you on that email, so it's, whether the mayor or yourself wanted to put in a quote for the press release.
I think the mayor can do that. That's the joy of being mayor. But I mean, it's just good stuff to say. I just hope it comes to fruition the way we think it's going to. And if this doesn't get clogged up, David, you've seen reimbursements kicked back because the date had expired. Well, while it was sitting on somebody's desk above us trying to get it through. So,
Well, that's what I was just going to ask for is I'd like to have you kind of get that paper from the state. You can kind of digest all that. I'd like to see kind of a plan and I kind of, what we anticipate, order meters this no later than this date, arrive within 30 days or 60, whatever you think. Kind of like a little chain of event. So we could kind of then start monitoring and seeing how we progress. Where come 2026, it's done.
Yes.
Then And that would be a nice thing, because then we can just monitor as we, if we hit a glitch. Oh, that's not done, what happened? And talk about it, so.
I have not lost grant money yet. I'm not gonna start now.
Okay, so we've taken care of items number A and number C. So let's move back to B, Second Street, City Park Master Plan.
Chair, this subcommittee asked to have the master plan be placed on the agenda. I think the goal was really just to kind of refresh the subcommittee's perspective on the plan that both of the subcommittee members were involved in during the planning effort. So I did include it in the packet, provided hard copies in your mailboxes, and really just I think the idea of agendizing was just again to be able to refresh what the outcome was of the master plan, and possibly look at what are some projects that you want to look at for the for preparation of the budget, and also grant opportunities.
Recently, and I thank you for doing this, because I asked this, but it just kind of refresh our memory. One of the things, because you, Liz, and I, we were part of this ad hoc committee, and I thought we asked them to put it in where we could phase portions of this with an approximate cost. And that's, I didn't see that in this plan or in this report. And I may have missed it because it's quite lengthy. So is that in here where phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, with an estimated cost to that phase?
I remember Joe seeing that.
Because we talked about that, and
At
I
some
don't
point.
see it.
There's I think chapter 5, starting on page 44. It's got a phasing plan.
Is the cost of
Yes.
that's
It's right here on this page, for example, phase 4 was 2,600,000. Phase 2 was 860,000. That was the parking lot.
Well, I could look it up. Oh, thank you. Okay. So, yeah, I just thought
Page 45.
45. Okay. I'll take a look at that, and then I just wanted to kind of get it and refresh our memory and just talk about it, because there is, again, as we're looking for funding, we may be able to make 1 or 2 of these phases. I do know we have some funding in our park and rec impact fee account, but there's going to be, we're looking at the pickleball courts. I'd like to see us look maybe towards a bocce court, a bocce courts. That was a big thing we talked about, and I know it was mentioned in here. I just didn't see it. So I know we can't do a lot like a parking lot redo, but there's certain things we can do to add amenities that we don't have in the community today. And I do know there's a lot of bocce players. I do know there's a lot of pickleball players in the community, and I hear about it all the time. And it would be nice if we could provide those amenities. We have a little bit of money, not a lot, but we may be able to do a couple of little things.
Well, page 44 and 45. 44 spells out phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then on the opposite page, it has an overview diagram with the cost. And I'm still fine with it. I think maybe the biggest concern that I would have at some point is phase 2, the parking lot. Just takes up so much park space. Joe, right there where the parking lot is and where we looked at expanding that, we have our horseshoe pits. And there's about 4, nobody ever uses that.
Yeah, same with River.
Yeah, that would be ideal for bocce ball and maybe even another pickleball, but then we sacrifice extra parking. I go by there a lot in the evenings with my dog. And if there's a baseball game, if the guys up there playing volleyball like they do just about every night, and then there's a family over under the pavilion, you can't find a parking spot. It's real difficult. So I get the fact that we need parking, but other than that, I don't know where to put the other amenities of the. But yeah, maybe, looking at these in stages, maybe there is some grant money available.
Jason?
Okay, well, I just wanted to get a copy and dust it off, to look at it and just see, but I know we're gonna talk about the pickleball courts, and I'm anxious to move on to that, but I do think, I know bocce courts aren't overly expensive, though there's little things like that, I think because we do have over 800,000 in our park and rent impact fee, so we can do a few things, and those little things, there's a high demand for them. So those little things, though, it's not going to take a lot of money, but it's going to make a big difference to a lot of people. So I'm under the mindset, let's make a few nice things happen.
So you're right, there is a ton of grant money out there, and even if we can divert from some of our other funds, now that we have this $3 million to do something like this, that would be great. You're welcome to take this,
And I think there's one in my box.
well, why don't you take this, and when you get the one in your box, put it in my box,
Oh, okay.
okay? Just in case it's not in your box. Yeah, and it's page 44 and 45.
Got it.
And just in terms of direction on this, do we want to keep this under standing items? Or do you want to just wait, subcommittee direction, and whether you want to bring that kind of specific direction?
No, I think specific direction, you could take it off. I mean, I have this, but I'm going to look it over, and you guys, we may want to put a specific like a bocce ball court. This would be a reference as to maybe where to go and what we're talking about based on the national.
Where are the horseshoe pits in Purple Park? Is that where that big sandbox is?
No, it's along, what is that, Great Gables? It's right along, if you drive down,
Oh,
so there's the play structure, and then there's two horseshoes. I have never seen anybody have horseshoes there. I walk that a lot, and that is.
The bocce, I think, is a lot more popular than horseshoes.
Oh, yeah, I think horseshoes is a thing in the past, yeah. But
I wonder if
bocce.
Mr. Berger was a horseshoe game.
Well, I remember I was on the league, I think you were too, and we'd go up to Hopland to,
That winery up there,
Yeah, and,
two horseshoes.
yeah, we go every Tuesday night with a group, and there was, it was a league.
Yeah.
And we get a hamburger, a pitcher of beer, and play bocce.
No, was it decomposed granite or was it a oyster shell?
It was decomposed granite. Oyster shell is just, we probably do cement when we do. So I don't think we could afford it.
Well, some people who are real aficionados, like oyster shell, because it creates a certain roll with the ball.
Right. Well, I don't know how we even take that off the ground. It's nice that we're doing the pickleball courts, and we have Brad, who is the pickleball liaison, because remember that is.
That's where I got this card.
Yeah, so he's given us guidance, and there's a league, so we know they're going to be used. If we ran an ad in the paper, is there a bocce ball league that would like to come forward with the city on development of bocce ball courts? That would be something I could get my arms around, but just for us to do it, hope they use it.
No, I think what we want to do is maybe one of those survey type things to see, maybe put 2 or 3 things that we feel we can fund, not all of them, but one out of those 3, and poll the community and see what really is the most dire. I mean, I know if we did that for a dog park or a skate park, I know it's going to go. And again, we may want to visit that again. I know the dog park's a big deal. So.
Always something to be mindful for is whenever you're creating new impervious surface, no matter the use, you get kind of a area threshold, and then you have to put in low impact development facilities. So parking lot expansions, bocce ball courts. I know a few years ago they were looking at making decomposed granite as an impervious surface, because after a few years it basically acts like asphalt. But it's something to consider. Cost consideration that you got to put in these bio swivels. What I'm talking about, the LID facilities.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like someday, I like California when it gets down into the weeds like that and makes you do stuff. But when I'm on this side of the desk, I don't like it at all. You know,
So are you in agreement? We'll just have that removed, but we can go ahead and,
yeah,
if we want to talk about a specific project, then we'll add that to,
yeah. Let's move it to the standing. You continue that. Okay.
No, it's still going and just. I think it was.
We should keep. Okay.
So we're just going to move that item down to standing and continued items. So why don't we jump to D, which is update on auto crosswalk controls on First Street and Citrus Square traffic signals.
Thank you, Chair. In your packet, page 107, it's item 6E, is a proposal that was provided by DC Electric. This is really just for information purposes. It was within my authority. We had budget. We received a request from a disabled student to have the audio push buttons available at both the First Street and Boulevard and Citrus Square and Boulevard signals. And this proposal just is really just here for an update to show that we are moving forward with this project to address the needs in our community. This would essentially complete, we would have all 4 signals that we currently have in the city with ADA compliant audible pedestrian system. They create different sounds depending on which direction you're going. So it gives a person that's visually impaired the ability to, instead of the green signal or the walk signal, I can't remember which one it does, but it's there's 2 different chirps. So one means you can go north, the other means you can go west, or which crosswalk you can use. It's kind of specific to the chirp sound, and these are considered ADA compliant for the visually impaired residents. The law, basically, the governing code says that if you receive a request for installation of the city, we're obligated to put this in. And I think we did receive that request in writing, but nonetheless, I think it's a good practice. But I actually saw a visually impaired student with his cane walking with an assistant helping walk through the signals. So I can see there is a need there to be able to safely walk from, I think, Washington School through either one of those intersections. Just want to provide an update because this is a project we're going to, we'll have hopefully done this fiscal year. As you can see, there's a little bit of lead time, 4 to 6 weeks to get the actual devices. A couple of weeks get it installed.
Now we have those down on Purple Shopping Center. We do. Okay.
As well as by ACE.
Yeah, I think we did one by you, so that's good. Joe, anything on that?
well, I just, so I'm clear, this is underway. There's no action.
Right, this has been authorized. This was,
So,
I because I know we have to do it, so
yeah,
it's went ahead.
yeah, no, that's good. Okay, so that's coming. So my thoughts that could probably come off as well. Because, right,
Well, let's put it on the screen.
yeah, then maybe, and you can just advise us each month quickly. It's being, given the status that we did.
All right, why don't we talk a little bit about citywide street site striping and pavement management?
All right, well, I see it's not in the packet. I certainly meant to, I know it was in the folder, include a proposal we received from W-Trans. I know both Vanessa and myself had conversations with W-Trans and Daily Whitlock about a proposal to do a comprehensive striking plan for the city. the proposal, and what I'll do is I'll send it to you. My thoughts on the proposal was that given the amount, it's just a little bit over $66,000 to bring this forward as part of the budget process. Council consider this item as part of our work plan for the next year's budget. But what I can do, I'll send it to you now. We can either put it as a standing item or as a discussion item for the next meeting and talk about it in more detail. But that was my.
So what is the 66K tell us? What does that mean for us?
I believe she was going to start, as we discussed in previous meetings, to start with the high traffic areas, the main traffic, if you will. And really kind of focus on that area as a first order of work, and then get into a more long-term kind of maintenance regimen. But I think the addressing immediate safety needs, immediate concerns, especially along the main corridor.
So is this actually identifying and completing the work, or is this just identifying what the price
It's
is?
just a plan.
It's a plan.
Yes, it's
So
a plan.
it doesn't include any of the needed work.
Correct. We would likely go out to bid for that, or talk about getting some of that done by State Streets. But I can't remember if she was asking about kind of a annual cost, outside of the taking care of the immediate needs along the boulevard.
So I guess if you could dominate the conversation of it, what prevents our street crew from going out and replacing block dots? For instance, they did that in the past. These are, the locations identified because it's missing, and to go back and replenish that. We need a plan to do those types of things. I understand a long-term plan for all the striping and all that, but these are, you have what should be a WL line that's not. Those are because of block dots missing. And those are things that I know in the past our street could do those items. Is that something they're no longer capable of doing, or is it just not?
I think it's just a matter of manpower. What are they able to reasonably do in a given day and given week, what they're permitting. So there is a season, for.
I mean, is that something you could take a look at what they're actually working on and maybe work that into the work schedule, that, what's a higher priority safety versus, I'm not, it's hard for me because I don't know what the bigger picture looks like, and I'm not trying to interfere with that big picture. But I do know there's things that become a safety issue and a regulatory issue, and those that we really need to do them, but they're not really a safety issue, where we may want to redirect some of that time. But I don't think it's a major, it'll probably take a couple of days, maybe a week, to go out and just replenish on the main corridors these block dots and just make that more of a higher priority. That's something you could at least take a look at.
We can certainly look at it. I think, the big conundrum is bandwidth. My bandwidth, and I don't know, honestly, what capacity the street crew has. I know they can do limited thermoplastic striping, but can they do kind of an annual ongoing, big ticket to the tune of about 10K a year? That might be a little bit of that.
I'm not suggesting that. I guess what I'm suggesting is putting the block dots back there, and the locations there, you can see it. So again, I don't want to.
And I think where we were going with that, remember, was, to try to move away from the block dots in some cases with good thermal plastic striping, because they do have that problem with they just pop up. And I've been looking at the street crew work program, and I've been slowly but working on trying to establish a more formal work program so we can really identify what is the work plan for the year. And so that's something that's in progress that I'm working on with them. I tried to get them geared up. We did the intersection at First and in Washington. The thermal plastic completed, the crosswalk should have been completed. We did the signage, and so I said, I want to identify other key intersections that we can get that, because we can do, those are the kind of things I think those are manageable. We can get out there, we can get those done. I think for a more comprehensive restriping, what Craig shared with me is really to look at getting we have our striking device is fairly old, and so it's something we should look at replacing.
Thermal or paint?
The actual paint in that case. So the thermoplastic is really, we envision it's like a big sticky note that you basically heat up and it sticks to the ground. It's got a reflective material. Where striking is still it's just paint. But having that device that you can use, the piece of equipment that you need to do larger sections. And kind of the issue I think we're necessarily at is it used to be a little bit easier because you could kind of just go out and do it. And now we've put a lot more focus on making sure safety, roads, traffic control plans. So you've got a lot. It requires more person power, basically. We have with our two-person group. It's all of getting the equipment and getting that work plan in place and kind of really looking at what can we accomplish. And that's where I think, I'd like to be able to do a little bit of that, but also having a plan in place and looking at where we can get a contractor kind of come in on an annual basis and let's get big swaths.
And I support that. I think that's a smart move. And maybe it would be helpful to know, maybe at a future meeting, we could have a little outline of our crew. I don't know how many people we have. We used to have, what happened currently in other positions?
Well, I think a lot of the positions, the positions that we have now are the ones I'm familiar with. I think the big reduction in staffing occurred when we recession and redevelopment. We're still only about 43 full-time equivalents. Of course, of that, 13 of them are officers and there are 3 police department personnel. So, parks, we've got really 2 staff, streets, we've got 2 water, and 2 wastewater. And that's really, it's kind of a team of 2, and you factor in vacations and sick leave and training, all of a sudden it's we're often down, and even the streets crew, Bill and Curtis, they're getting assigned to water leaks. We really prioritize that, or other projects that are similar to that. Dylan's been out, who was out on the 4th Street, Dylan has been out providing that kind of that on-site staffing person for the contractors. So,
gentlemen, if I could just a couple of things. Craig came out, I guess it was last year or the year before, I did a striking at Portofino and Benicia Way where I live, and it was the thermal stuff. But 66,000 is a lot of money. I was under the impression that we would just put out a contract or something for 25,000 a year, hire somebody to come in and do some striking for us, and we would identify which intersections that were the ones that really needed it. As far as the pavement management program goes, heck, all the Tom needs to be, we could start right there, up on 4th Street, right over that is Antonio. That's all elevator. So, we know what we need to be paid. It's a question of, and we know what we need to be striped, at least I think we do. And we know that Craig and Curtis just doesn't know to do it. So that's what I thought we were going to do, was to go out with the contractors and say, what would you charge us per foot, per intersection, however. But did I miss that?
Well, I think that's where we do want to get there, to be positioned to do that, exactly what we're saying here. What I was kind of envisioning with the plan was all laid out for us. So, even going to a contractor, it's not always the simplest thing. Well, I want to restrike this section. It's kind of, here's the, kind of a mini spec, if you will, for this section of a street. Here's how we want it striped. Here's the linear feet. We kind of have an idea of what that cost is, so we're budgeting for that in advance. So that was kind of the plan. What I think I hear you saying is, let's try to get some done. My recommendation would be, let's try to develop a plan. I understand that what proposal we've gotten is a little more pricey than maybe we really want to support. But I think there's still value in it. Kind of the other thing that the other piece of this that we were talking about with W-Trans was, there shouldn't be those areas where it's just, you have a faded stripe, right? But kind of looking at it through the lens of what can we do if we're going to restripe it? What can we do to also do it in a way that is cost effective, but might also be effective in terms of traffic safety and some of the other considerations. A good example, I think, where we've done these improvements, it looks really nice. And you kind of see that the transition between where the old striping and the new striping is completely different. And so that the new striping really is reflective, it includes like the buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane. And then those are things where we ideally kind of have a little plan and fill that in so that we go, okay, for here, this is what striping is going to look like. And be able to tie it all in. I think that at least that was the vision I had when we talked to Daily, so that we maximize opportunities for, or especially the pool environment got really expansive wood. Some of the way to kind of help manage traffic flows is through striping, and to kind of factor some of that into how the streets are striped versus just going back out and kind of refreshing the existing line.
I just don't. I just spent $66,000 for a study that's going to go on the shelf because we can't afford the pavement management program portion of it with our resources that we have, and we'd be lucky if we can afford that type of detailed striping that you're suggesting. I just
So
don't
this
know
is
where
one
we're
of the
putting it.
pavement, right? How we're striking this is condition of roads too. Right?
Well, I think we're just talking about striping. Now, the condition of the road plays a little bit of a factor. We're not going to propose new striping on an elevated road. Right out of the gate. And so looking at the existing pavement program, we're able to identify years of service left. So on those roads that had 0, I told her, don't even look at those for now. We can add those as they get improved. We can add those into this annual plan. But I think the idea of the annual plan, rather than go and make a project every year, it would be a document that lives on and potentially gets updated, periodically as we do make improvements. But the idea being that we have a set dollar budgeted, and annually we go out and do some systematic maintenance of the striping. And it would ideally optimize mobilization costs by area. Let's get this one thing. There's some assessment of how long is the striping supposed to last, and really kind of getting those factors dialed in. It could be that we go back to W-Trans. I think, the other part of the story is I just don't have the bandwidth to put this kind of program together for you guys. So, we've got to go out and get the transportation engineers help with that.
Well, a couple of years ago, the city manager, I believe, was Paul Carrot, Joe, I think you wanted to council then. And we had, we graded our streets, and the ones that were on the top of the list, one of them was Cloverdale Boulevard. We resealed it. And, you know, my big thing was, oh, geez, that street's good, what are we doing? And it was just to keep it good.
Right.
You know, we wanted to preserve the good streets. But we have already had that before. And now this is the same type of report that they're looking to do.
I'm not aware that we have a striping.
No, it wasn't striping, it was the paved, I guess it was road
I
condition.
believe it's the PTAP report.
What is it?
PTAP, I'm not sure what that stands for, but I believe, and it does. There's a lovely table in there that was all of your roads in alphabetical
Yes.
order and their service life. And then there's recommendations to maximize, you know, city dollars. You should get slurry sealed, you should get chip sealed, these need to get reconstructed. And it takes into account, you know, how long does a chip seal last versus a slurry seal. Really, the idea is to maximize, you know, the efficiency of the budget dollars, while still extending the life of pavements throughout the city as much as possible. It's a balancing act.
Can we use that?
We did use that to help inform striking. You know, we certainly, we sent that to Dignity. And my understanding is it helped her inform this proposal, but, you know, I think the big, you know, it kind of goes back to, you know, if the road is only gonna last 2 years, do you want to put a tighter stripe on it? I would say no. Let's wait the 2 years and then we'll strike that bad boy.
I'm kind of all over the board on this one because I'm sure, you know, the plan would be nice to have, but like, I kind of agree that Councilmember Walker, 66,000 would go a long way bringing in a contractor and do a lot of striking.
It would, but you would have to have plans and specs for that contractor to work.
Don't they know what, I mean,
There's existing, they're there, they're just.
Understood. Yeah, you know, it's not a simple time to grab the shovel and go do stuff.
Well, it's not necessarily spring.
Well, you know.
you and I on Sunday afternoon, Jay, right?
Okay, well, just to finish my thought, if I could, you know, the reason I asked that I was put on there was the pavement condition of the area jurisdiction report for 2020. In Cloverdale, we came in at risk for our streets. And we received, you know, we're getting close to the port. And there's only 5 other cities jurisdictions that hit the port. And so we're getting down there. We're down, and it's not a good report to be in. And I was hopeful again, and I'm really sorry that you guys didn't have an opportunity to look at the webinar. Just when I gave you this, there was a webinar coming up on roads and bridges to talk about what you would be able to go after. And that webinar is come and gone, but we probably still could get the information. But I was hopeful that with the plan would make it more shovel ready to go after a grant to make some of these road improvements happen. Because as I mentioned, $1.2 trillion is out there.
Sure.
And that's a lot of money. I'm not suggesting we're going to get a lot of it, but we might get a piece of it. And I'm looking at, you know, timelines. And so getting the plan, so we have shovel-ready programs to actively go after grant funding while the money's there. And because I'm in agreement with Councilmember Walker, if we're going to try to fund it out of our general fund, it's just not going to happen. We just don't have the ability to do that. So, I mean, I don't know. I was, when we were going to go after this plan, I thought it was going to look at the roads condition as well as the striking route and identify those. So we would have a plan that we could actually go out and look for money to fix it.
Can we do this? Can we look at the grant that Councilmember Powell was referring to and see if this report would better our positions to get that grant? You know, being a rural area, population under 20,000, you know. What are your thoughts on that?
My understanding of the proposal It's been a while since I looked at it, but my understanding is that at least as far as phase one, that she is proposing to look at the boulevard, and get us into some early shovel ready. I don't believe that, plan specs and estimates are included in that, but some solid recommendations that can get us there.
Yeah, that maybe we can just cover it. So, one of the things we emphasized, Joe, was, the high priority areas, the sections that were identified in the proposal, Citrus Fair Drive, Cloverdale Boulevard, First Street, Woodville Boulevard, Jefferson, and then locations that concern 3 additional sheets, possibly 3 locations. They would provide space plans with 90% drawn, showing how we'd like striking to be shown on all of those areas. So that's kind of, I think, what you're referring to as this. So we actually have a plan to show, here's all the striking we want on all the various areas, and with a cost estimate, so that gives us that roadmap. So it kind of helps us with applying for a grant, because we can say we're going to do X number of street segments at a cost of X, and then we can have that information kind of ready to go. Whereas right now we don't really have a standard specification. It's kind of everybody's guess. Ask what is the cost for striking. So it's really we're really at an informal stage, and even if we were to go out with and ask the contractor, they're going to ask us, well, how do you want to strike? So they're going to ask all these questions, and in order for us to be consistent, that's where it's good to have a plan. Well, this is what we want. We want this to be shown.
Are they capable of doing the grant for us, W-Trans?
That's a good question.
On the grant application, I can certainly ask it, and I'll be happy to review the. I think the webinar was recorded. I think that's why I didn't watch it. Joe said it was recorded. So
Because I wouldn't have a problem spending money if they were going to do some grant filing for us. Maybe not to the tune of 66, but they can encompass all of that into a grant and see what they can do. Would you be interested in doing it that way? It's just to spend 66,000 and having hand us a piece of paper, then from there we take it out on bid.
I'm still under the mindset that, could we look at how other cities redo their striking? I mean, what does Hillsburg do? I mean, they've redone a lot of their striking. Is that done in-house? Is that done, do they contract? I mean, it seems like if you want to set a WL lines going down the boulevard, I don't think I'm plan for that. I honestly don't believe that. Same with Cloverdale. I mean, come in and refresh it and do it. 66,000 will go a long ways and get some of that work done. It won't maybe be all uniform throughout the city, but it will be clear and fresh and regulated in sort of purpose. And I guess I don't know, but it would be interesting to know what the other cities, if they're doing in-house and that. And if so, could we maybe contract with them to come up 1 or 2 times a week for over, thinking $66,000 and actually have them come up and do some work for us. Work out an agreement.
We meet monthly, the SCTA, Sonoma County Public Works Directors. Meet monthly. This would be a good agenda item to add. All announcements.
I know when I was, I worked in the police work, and we did contract working with other police departments for different needs, getting expertise in areas that we didn't have. Nor would we want to fund it, because we just didn't use it now. We don't need it. For Santa Rosa may have it in place today. And yeah, we can certainly open it up and come up and work to do some of these streets. Costs of the material basis.
Is Johannes part of that group?
I believe so.
Well, he lives in Cloverdale.
Oh, he does, okay.
He lives over Cloverdale. Oh, I'm not sure where he is, back there somewhere. Where is he in Councilmember Cruz's?
Same kind of thing.
conflicts. Yeah,
Yeah, I believe he is in those meetings. There's a lot of them. I gotta get my head around which one.
we just keep mentioning Cloverdale, Cloverdale. Monte Cruz, Cloverdale, Monte Cruz.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. And, not to beat the dead horse, it was just first kind of doing these one-offs, just kind of trying to come up with a comprehensive plan. That's what I think we were looking at, and then we could just do chunks and get it done over a period of time.
Well, I think, again, I don't want to, I think in a perfect world, that's the right way to do it. But I look at this park plan that we did how many years ago, and we haven't done one thing. So it sits on the shelf.
2019.
A lot of money went out, but again, we just need to, we're so restricted. But again, I think we need to take a look at our streets. And if there's a potential grant out there, we need to get that looked at.
And if we can find somebody like them that can actually do a grant and right of course, I would promise them. So we think we know what we're going to do on that one. We're going to circle back to them and see if they've got grant writing back.
And we'll see if there's another jurisdiction that could.
Yeah, how they're tackling it.
Yeah, and if they'd be open to maybe time and materials to come up and do some work for us. Oftentimes, I said, yeah, we could take that into our work plan.
I know I've said this before, Bob Perot, Bob used to be our city manager here in Cloverdale over 20 years ago. He was city manager down in Grover Beach. I think
He's an assistant.
Yeah, and they repaved just about all their streets that ran through. And I asked him how they did it, and he said they bonded it. And they did it that way. And I guess the point is that there's ways to do it. I think Councilmember Pollard is more focused on striping. I'm focused on striping too, but I want the paper redone.
And just to clarify, I'm focused on both. But right now, my concern is some of the regulatory. It's faded to the point where they're not valid, and that's a safety issue. That's what I was focused on.
So, but yeah, and we know when it's repaved, it's under the stripe. That's part of the process. So
There's some of the pavement with the stop on the pavement is totally wrong. It's totally wrong. So with the stop sign, somebody covers the stop sign and the stop sign. And it's a problem. So.
okay, so we'll leave that right there on items for discussion and move on to 4th Street. How's it going? You were just there.
It looks good. So right now, it looks like they've got all of the water services done, and they've got temporary pavement over those. They're digging up the corners where you have EDA ramps across the street. Unfortunately, it looks like it's possibly already a dead crate middle. After this meeting, I'm gonna see if I can find some PG&E contact information with alley linings, crate middle tree, or coordinate with Heather so we can so she can get that tree out of there. It's just kind of the way it is. Recently, we found a hole in the sewer lateral, and so and so rather than put that on the property owner, I kind of just said, let's just have them fix it while we're out there. We can spend more money with me dealing with the property owner, and just having that done. And then, getting too many people in the trench is always a concern too. And so, the good news there is that, holes and laterals are a source of inflow and infiltration. So it's good that that's buttoned up. But it looks like they're going along swimmingly. It's all torn up out there, sidewalk wise, but there's signage directing pedestrians to cross here and go over there. And
did you find any water leaks in those laterals?
I don't believe so.
No.
I can find out.
No,
But yeah, I haven't heard of it.
We did find that there different water main lines in place than what were identified on the plans.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, so that was new to Darren. We discovered we had some parallel water mains up there, different size. it complicated the, well, it made it work out just fine, but initially it was a little confusing. It's not a real place, and but it was good that this provided the opportunity for our team to see what's in place. If we hadn't decided to add this work and council supported it, all that would have gotten buried and very well. These are the old laterals, so it was just a matter of time. So I think going forward, really, if we do this type of work, certain neighborhoods we should be looking at replacing the service laterals as well.
At a minimum, I'm a big fan of replacing underground infrastructure if it's appropriate before you pay something. And so pavement projects, striping projects, sometimes it goes deeper than that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it adds to the cost, but it's a best practice. We want to go back and carry that.
All right, well, thank you for that update. Justin, questions? Okay, then why don't we move to the South Cloverdale Boulevard and Hillsborough Avenue intersection? And I guess that was added because of that accident that we had, regardless of whose fault or.
Oh, it was from the council. We had during public comments, several people get up and obviously very concerned, very unfortunate. The major injury accident. I don't know the condition of the person, but I did ask the chief to provide some statistics, and he did. He was able to get back about 15 years. There's been 13 accidents at that intersection. One involved a vehicle versus bicycle. That was back in 2011. Then there was a pedestrian that back in 2013 with moderate injuries. And then there's another pedestrian which turned out to be a fatal. And that's when we end up looking at strip in, which $80,000+ and then never worked right at all.
In ground lines.
Yeah, that was again spending money, and then there was the most recent 2022 pedestrian major injury accident. So it was dark that night, and it was the other fatality. It was dark, and the one with the minor injuries of bicycle versus car during the day. Pedestrian. The one before that, it was dark. So all three pedestrian accidents happened at night. It's just been a problem intersection for quite a long time. And I'm under the mindset we really need to look at signal lights. Whether it needs to be a full functioning signal, I don't know. And that's in Hillsborough. They just recently on Dry Creek put in a new pedestrian pathway that walks from downtown all the way through to the north edge of the city. So they put in a signal light that only operates the pedestrian crossing. And the light's green constantly, and that's it's a sensor goes off, it goes yellow and red. Cars have to stop, pedestrians will cross. Strictly a pedestrian control light, not for an intersection, but for pedestrian crossing.
Foster Creek.
On Foster Creek. It's new, it went in within the last year. So I don't know what something like that costs in comparison to a fully functioning signal light. But it would seem like something like that in that intersection would work perfect, just to have it when there's kids crossing, have it amber, yellow, then red, cross, cars have to stop, ignite, and then it's time when they get across, it turns green. And stays green, so you don't have to keep stopping going through a cycle because there's nobody there. But when a pedestrian wants to go, it becomes. So that would be something I would like us to at least look at, get a cost on. And as we look at the budget, I think we need to have something in the budget to address that intersection. Like I said, we went through this with the fatality back when I was on the council back then. We ended up spending it was just over $80,000. Did nothing. And then we now went through it again. We put in the new system. And I don't know how much that system that's there now. And we just had another major pedestrian accident. I think we just have to do something.
Joe, I agree with you 100%. And thinking back to the meeting, when the group came forward through their interpreter, they have their frustrations with that intersection and that whole situation. And I kind of, somebody had said something about where the light's working, and one of the translators said, you have to tell people how to use them.
Yeah.
So I got out of that maybe they just didn't know to push that button.
But there's some, they make them with sensors.
Yeah.
So as soon as you
It's
cross,
triggered.
it triggers. And that's what we were needing. So a lot of the people, there's constant traffic at that, pedestrian traffic at that particular intersection because of the housing across the street, people going to the school. It's just throughout the day, it's constant. I think, I know Santa Rosa has that on Santa Rosa High School at Mendocino. They also have that same type of, it just senses it, it turns the lights. It's not for an intersection, pedestrian crossing. Same with Hillsburg has on Bright Creek. So
Where is that?
Santa Rosa, well, it's in Santa Rosa, so the city of Santa Rosa.
Yeah,
But it's at the high school on Santa Rosa.
it's the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, right there. So they have.
Traditional signal.
Yeah, until somebody crosses, but it's always green. Right?
Yeah, it's not for cars, it's for pedestrians, but it operates like it would for a car, where it goes yellow, red. But this is just strictly for cars when the pedestrians are across that street. And so they just put one in at Hillsburg, so it would be pretty good, just a phone call to Hillsburg, phone call to the city of Santa Rosa, to find out who they use, what it costs, what the process was, how it works. But I think we need to at least explore. I really don't know. It would seem to me it'd be a lot cheaper than fully signalizing that entire intersection. I don't think it needs it. It's more of a pedestrian problem. Yes.
And I think that's something we should definitely look at. The system that was, the new system that was put in, it's, as I understand, it's performed very well in other jurisdictions, and it's a flashing beacon. Our beacon is a little different than I've seen in other places, because it's got the two flashing lights underneath. We do have beacons, which is the sign where they're surrounded with LEDs, and they tend to be a little bit brighter. So that could be just a simple fix. It's looking at changing that beacon. I call it beacon, it's really a flashing sign component, but also looking at the solution that you propose. Well, one of the things that I think has been identified at that location is, especially north of that, there's really very few streetlights. And so, and then likewise, heading south, there are two immediate streetlights just offset from the intersection. And I'm not sure where the bright part of those lights shining, whether they should shine, down into the crosswalk, but it looks like they shine kind of offset and slightly south of where the pedestrians walk. But if you go farther south, especially on the northbound lane, there's not another streetlight for quite a distance. And so what I think it creates is a situation where you have dark and light, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that in and of itself is a safety hazard, because for a driver, it can, between that dark and the light, sometimes it makes it difficult to see. Right. So I think part of the issue is the overall just illumination, not necessarily right at the crosswalk itself, but beyond the crosswalk. So again, cars are approaching probably at a speed it shouldn't be, and they move through that crosswalk without realizing that there's somebody there. And so, it might be something we could look at as kind of what's the proper illumination that should be needed, not just at that location, but from a stretch, both north and south. So kind of looking at it through, what's the appropriate lighting that we
There is a light that hasn't worked, and it probably still doesn't, that's right there past that intersection. The very first one is you're going south on the right.
It's on southbound.
Yeah, that one hasn't worked, and I don't know why.
Right, the paint there,
Yeah.
that first one right by the crosswalk. So that, okay, well, that's good to know, because we should look at that.
Take a look at that, and, but I really think we're beyond that, and this flashing lights, I think we need to get something.
Of course.
I really do, it's, you know, I don't want to see another major injury to pedestrians. People wear dark clothes, I mean, I leave the council meeting at night, and I'm straining because I'm looking. But, and then you see somebody walking, and they got black, and it's black out, I mean, it's dark, even with me. And then you got lights, car lights hitting you, and you're driving, and it's just dark. So I can see where, that's why I'm thinking more of some type of a signal light that, you know, that senses it, the yellow, stop, stop. People could cross.
Well, you know, and not to take away from anything that you're saying, or, you know, I would like to get across on those red lights as well. You have to wonder, I didn't read the police report, who was the actual driver of the vehicle? You know, was it a 100-year-old old man without his glasses at home? I mean, how did that all come about?
Yeah.
Was it truly just an accident, or was it? Well, actually, they do know, don't they? They did catch him, and it was some young kid. I think I just sent you.
Yeah, I think the police department did great work to
Get him right away.
apprehend the individual. You know, it's unfortunate that he ran, may not have been, a consequence for the driver of the scene, but, you know, clearly the individual was crossing was not as visible as it should have been.
Yeah.
And coupled with people, I think, generalizing here that you're not paying attention as much driving is, you know, kind of, to me, calls out the, what I'm hearing on social media in general is that there's a lot of concern about the rate of speed with folks are driving in our neighborhoods and our streets. You know, still texting, driving on painful attention is no problem. And I think there's something to be said for the need for a campaign around traffic safety. And I don't think it has to be complex. It's that messaging that we can get out to the community that it's still valuable. It reminds folks, you know, pay attention, drive the speed limit, you know, all those kinds of things. You gotta stop. I mean, I know just from walking downtown daily that even if I'm saying it's a crosswalk, you know, cars should be obligated to stop, and they don't. And it's pretty, I find it's a little threatening when they're, of course, they're exceeding the speed limit, and it's don't go. So you know, some of that's enforcement, I think, but some of it, I think, it's a combination of education, enforcement, and then it's not. Well, I didn't know that. Well,
I look at it different, you know, to be honest with you. You can put reminders out, but you know, they have a license, or they shouldn't be driving. And they should know that. You do drive, you don't drive faster than reasonably. And, you know, it gets back to everybody's in a hurry. I mean, I drive down the freeway, I'm doing 70 miles an hour, which is over the speed limit. I get it. I'm in the way. I mean, they fly past me. They're doing 85, 90. Now, do they not know the speed limit 65? Yes, they know that. So people violate it, and unfortunately, it just, I'm really sensitive to this particular intersection because we've got so many major injuries and fatality. You were at the meeting. These people have legitimate concerns. I would like to see a plan that we're going to talk about for budget time. This budget.
Tell me again, the intersection there. You said what?
Hillsburg, at Cloverdale Boulevard at Hillsborough.
I mean, the intersection of the infrastructure that you like.
Dry Creek Road, approaching Hillsborough Avenue. It's just before, between,
But the railroad tracks.
yeah, it's right by the railroad
Big
tracks.
John's.
Yeah, it's right, yeah,
That's fine.
it's right at the railroad tracks. As you-
That area's so noisy right in there.
Yeah, it's before you hit the intersection, as you're driving, come off the freeway going towards Hillsborough Avenue, before you hit the railroad tracks, it's strictly across controlled crosswalk or pedestrian.
It's probably Fox Creek Trail. And it's,
LSS.
yeah, and it connects downtown to where Grove Street connects with Pittsburgh Avenue on the north.
Where did you say the one in Santa Rosa was?
It's
Across from Chick-fil-A.
yeah, on Mendocino Avenue.
You know what Chick-fil-A.
And the Santa Rosa High School, between the junior college and high school, they're side by side there. It's right in there. So also, I would like to see if there's a possibility, the Office of Traffic Safety does often provide grants. And we can check with them to see what the funding cycle looks like. If we have a shovel-ready project, which this would be an easy one, we want a signal of some sort, because then we have statistics that I think would help justify the need for the pedestrians. So that would be my first recommendation, that we take a look at, see if there's funding available to fund it. But I do want to see something, and I don't know if you concur, best, but I would like to see something in the budget. If we can't get funding through a grant, we need to get funding in the budget to make something happen. Let's make that decision.
Do we have anything in the budget now for that? Under public safety,
We don't currently,
PD department?
but we can take a look.
Well, first we have to figure out what we want to do and how much it's going to cost. And I think, and we're going to be talking budget here in the next, whenever we get the meeting. We have meetings scheduled yet.
I think there's a doodle pull out.
I submitted my dates, but I haven't heard anymore.
Yeah, I think it's out. Shape day.
Okay,
For a workshop.
yeah.
Did you get anything about it?
There was a little doodle poll.
We do a poll where you click on the link and you check boxes
Yeah.
that are good times for you.
You should have gotten, yes, if you don't get it.
I've got a big black hole here.
Yeah, I'm not good with doodles, so. Anyway, yeah, but I think we need to address it, and I would like to have a plan, some cost information, options, cost information with the options, and hopefully we can identify potential grant funders moving forward. But if not, we need to figure out a method for this.
I'll send you the link.
Thank you. And I accidentally mailed you, Councilmember Carla was talking about the report that we received the email from Chief Ferguson. I thought it was on this email I sent you. So.
You can get that.
It's the chief stats.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I asked them for it the last time, the council, and I asked.
well, that concludes our new items for discussion, and now we're going to move on to standard and continued items. If anybody needs a party break or anything, just go. David, I'm going to, as always, leave this to you. There's a list A through Q, which you think is important, just a quick briefing on each one, and if Councilmember Paulo or myself want to go into more detail, we'll just raise it.
So just starting with item A, the capital improvement program. Really, at this juncture, our parks team is focused on where the next updates is pickleball, plaza restrooms, and basketball courts. So that's kind of where we're at. But we want to make sure that we view the capital improvement program as a living, breathing document that we continue to keep updated and refresh. So it's good opportunity as we go into the budget for council members to in the subcommittee to kind of look at that and say, let's get this project on the list, even if it's not necessarily what we're funding now, but to get it on the radar and some projects take time to it's easy to name it and say what it is, but to get the cost estimates, identify funding sources and those kinds of things, it'll take a little bit of time. And so just having that in the back of our minds, that this is a good time for us to, just keep checking in and see if there's any additional projects that we want to put on that CIP list. I think there's the growing interest. We talked today about the bocce ball. So bocce ball work is easily bocce ball, and we kind of get some cost estimates, and then at least we have something to work from. I think that's kind of what helped the SAU team when you did the grant application, was kind of looking at the CIPs and
That's right.
so that's why I'm going to say this is the document that's on, it has a good reference. So that's all I had to say on that at this point.
A couple of comments on the CIP. I think it's really important that we do review it in conjunction with this grant that we just received. Some of those were high priorities on that. So it gives us an opportunity to take a look at that again and reprioritize, add new things to it. But the second part of that is the ARPA funding, and that may be on here. I'm not sure. I think it's on here as well. But the ARPA funding, I think it's important that you have told you and I talked about briefly, that we have the ability potentially to pay ourselves back. They've changed the rules a little bit. And so that money, literally, we could actually put it into our own general fund, and which would allow us to do things like we're talking about that are urgently needed, like some of the safety issues that we're talking about, and whether we need a signal light at a certain place because of major things that maybe under the old rules, that money may not have qualified for.
Right.
So I think it's important that we look at the bigger picture of some of the needs of the city and try to, I'm not talking about whittling the money away. I'm talking about really trying to fix some really things that are broken, that we don't have to get really financial.
Well, in this one, I think we're talking just about the parks and recs, are we not? And not just capital improvements across the board.
Well, it's up to the committee, how you want us to, what do you want to cover under this topic? I think initially we brought it forward as, well, here's the parks yet.
Well, okay.
We could, really the whole CIP kind of
really
within the purview of this subcommittee.
But the one thing that I always talk about is, I just have to keep talking to Supervisor Gore, but I still think the county should be pitching in some of our parks within the city.
Well, they have on the pool.
Yeah.
And we don't want to underestimate. It was only $700,000.
No,
Big number.
What I'm basically saying is, their county folks come out here and use our basketball courts, softball leagues and all that, and the county doesn't contribute. The city does. I would, because we're so rural, I'd like to see the county kicking some money on an annual basis for parking. So.
I think, and I agree with you, if we have specific things that we're looking for and we can tag where it's representing not just our city residents, which we can do through leagues and different things that are going on. Say, for instance, we want to do a soccer court. We could certainly make a case where this is not just Cloverdale residents. People have, and here's what because they agreed to partner on some of these when we put a case together. They didn't even raise an eyebrow. So I think, I like your concept, but I'm agreeing with you. I just think we've got to kind of not just hit them up for money, but come up with a plan and then bring them into the conversation and what they could help contribute to that plan. Yeah. And they have been amenable to that, so that, I think they would be. So, pickleball,
No, that's next.
Okay. Well, where we're at on that is, Hector's been shepherding this project forward. We've got a very good proposal to actually do the court. And it falls under our uniform procedures for bidding, so we can do through the informal process. We were still waiting, the end of the informal process, we still should make every effort to try to get 3 bids. One was non-responsive. We got a very good bid from a professional that does a lot of this type of work. And Hector was working with our local contractor to get a bid. And I suggested that we identify a timeline, and if they don't respond, it's just not responsive. And then we can go move forward with the one informal bid, and there are uniform accounting procedures. Council still has to, so we agree to council go work the bid, and we'll establish a project budget and all that stuff. The other component that we're having a little challenge is we followed up with the recommendation of our local pickleball aficionado about striking. And unfortunately, the person that they recommended, he just retired. So we were going to see if there's an alternative firm to
Hector mentioned, you mentioned somebody here in town that's does it.
Yeah, I think
He was Gerald, I think.
I believe he's going to follow up with Fitzgerald. So he hasn't gotten a proposal yet to do the actual strike.
Yeah.
Once we have that, I mean, I think we'll be able to put together a budget and bring it forward to council, do a board of informal bid and proceed. We did get the green light from Myers Nave once we had the numbers that they could really look at and say that it was qualified for informal bid.
So at some point, I'd like to see you bring this as a point of information to the full council, to bring them maybe into the conversation. And no action, just here's what we're doing, here's where we're at, this is what the committee's working on, and here's where we're going, and if there's any issues or concerns, let them voice them at that time. We can address them. I think I don't want to blindside them that we're going down this path, but we do have funding available in our Parks and Rec impact account to move this project forward. So I kind of like, it's just my suggestion, guys, I'm interested in your comments, but I really think it would be as a point of information, lay out what we're doing at the subcommittee level, and here's what our intent is, and then see if there's any questions.
Well, I can mention that in our reports tomorrow, the city council
I
meeting.
think that would be detailed enough. I was thinking
The
more.
whole report.
I was thinking more of just, we're looking at Fort Park, we're looking in this area. This is where, maybe ask Brad if he could be there. If they have a question on why pickleball, he could get up and address that, talk a little bit about it, just kind of get them into so as we go down this road further, they're kind of in the loop. If there's questions or concerns, we'll identify what they are.
You know how I do it, Joe. Now all of a sudden we're gonna have 3 more inputs on where it should be.
Well, I mean, I just didn't want to see us get to the point where we go before them for approval and then we start backpedaling to try to answer questions. I'd rather get them to identify them now so we can, at our committee, we can work through that.
Well, just a thought for the subcommittee, I'd be happy to put together an email to council providing kind of an overview and update and cover kind of what are we doing, how are we doing it, why, kind of answer all the questions and just kind of lay it out there. If they have any questions or concerns, they can contact me. That way, if it comes forward as an unagendized item, we get into a big discussion. We'll avoid having to do that. And I can reemphasize what I can do with the council meeting is just say, you got an email, provide an update. ball. So I can report as soon as possible.
That kind of happened with the bathrooms in the closet. You know, I mean, when we had that with David and Hector, I think on both of those projects, it was just, you know, just make it ready so that all the council has to do is approve it. You know, we don't want to debate colors of the bathroom or, you know.
Yeah, and I'm not asking, I just want to understand, is there, where did this come from? I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, but why over there? I mean, these are the things that catch them off guard. And I think as a courtesy, it's good to get them into the conversation early. Doesn't mean it's going to change where we're trying to go, but at least if there's a concern, we can address it. I like your idea, David. And in fact, I'd also like to suggest Brad have that PowerPoint, and that would be good. And here's, it came to the subcommittee and you can put down his position. I can't remember what it is, but, you know, a request from the community. Yeah, several, it's become real popular, see the attached PowerPoint, and they answer a lot of questions. And here's what the committee's working on. Want to solicit if you have any questions or comments, please get them to you, and you'll make sure, you know, you'll answer it. But I like that. But that brings them into the conversation. They're aware of it. If there's any concerns, they say, why are you doing that? Then you could say, well, I'll take it back to the subcommittee and I'll raise these issues. Yeah, but
All right, I'll work on an update, better located out before the council.
not necessarily an update, it's an information.
Sure.
I like the update. It's an informational, I want to bring, and you could say the subcommittee asked you, they wanted to make sure you're aware that this came before them, that they're currently working on it, where they're looking at identifying a funding recommendation, but here's what we're looking at. And so if you have any questions or comments or any thoughts, please get them to you so we can get it back to the committee. This way, they're aware of it.
No, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because I mean, otherwise, we get there and spend 35, 40 minutes at a council meeting answering the basics of, you know, why didn't I know about this? Or who decided to do that? Or whose idea was it? And, you know, that kind of stuff.
Well, yes, that's what we did. David, can you help us on that?
Yeah, you know, the reality is always to me, you know, I'm always.
It's whoever's not.
So,
I'm not going to too much. The main thing is that they're aware. And they have an opportunity to ask you questions if they have to ask questions. So they can't say, well, I didn't know anything about it. Why didn't you do this? Or why didn't no one ask me? We're asking.
all right. Well, with that being said, then let's move on to public restrooms and closet.
Okay, I sent an update from the public restroom company. Hector and Kevin have been busy working or coordinating with the fabricator on the design. I think what I sent you is reflective of what has been an exhibit showing what it kind of looks like with the amenities that have been proposed thus far. I think it's reflective of the feedback that they provided, and I know Hector's had a lot of input to, you know, kind of from the maintenance perspective. But just, I mean, the really goal here is kind of parallel tracks is we entered into a contract with Mo Engineering to do the bids and specs for the utilities, the wet utilities, well, the dry utilities will probably need some electricity too, but to service the restrooms and basically have it be ready to essentially place this prefabricated facility down and do the connections, and we're off and running with the connected plaza or restroom. So restroom company, they have about a 5-month lead time to get this project completed, and we kind of think it falls in line to, if we can get the plans and specs done, get that out to bid, identified that as part of this work, we're gonna also solicit the assistance of the contractor to assist us with connections, bring in the prefabricated restroom facility, once all the underground utilities are installed, and hopefully just connect. And it's got a prefabricated pad that comes with it, so it's really kind of plug and play or sit and play, you know.
So once all the pipes are there, so the pad is first, so everything lines.
Right, all the utilities are gonna be kind of popping up out of the ground.
Nice.
And then you just bring this in, you connect, and it should be operational at that point. Ideally, we would have all the work or all of the plans in place for bid award agreement so that a contractor can start that work immediately at the end of September. That's kind of the idea. We assuming Friday Night Live completes their summer series, and then the next week or as soon as thereafter if possible, we release the contractor to start that underground work. And it shouldn't be a big project to do the underground work. Don't have specific dates, but that'll be identifying the bids. That's how many working days it would take the contractor to kind of complete the utility connection. And then the other piece is the restroom manufacturer that they'll bring a crane in and they'll just set it right down and we should be able to do it. Yeah. So hopefully those two timelines, kind of the underground and the restroom, kind of come together and we can kind of get it all done. If not, I know we can cap stuff, kind of keep it secure and
What's the turnaround, 6 months?
just about 6 months. Yeah. So we're looking, that's why we're looking, we should do the other work and, get all of the plans done, get it out to bid, award bid, agreement, insurance, release that work right when the Friday Night Live kind of wraps up so that we're not be ready.
So are we doing a lot line adjustment?
We haven't proposed that yet. I know there's now measuring. There's the two planter areas behind the plaza. There's the phone booth and the water fountain.
Yeah,
those two planter areas. I think I'll have to follow up with Hector, but I thought that the restroom facility would fit right in there. Now the back door would be accessible from the parking area.
you see, if I stand at the bus stop on Cloverdale Boulevard and I look down towards the police station, there's a grassy area over here that butts up against City Hall. It goes down and then it makes a right-hand turn, then a left-hand turn. And this is all parking lot where the old shed used to be, the old facility that we used to have at that prefab. Well, is the lot line here or is the lot line up against the building? Because one of those properties is sitting on the other parcel's portion.
I think the lot line is reflective of where the fence is now. That's my understanding.
So then the plaza is actually on City Hall property.
Well, I'll take a look at that, Vice Mayor, but I believe that it kind of jogs like that.
The whole lot line does?
But let me confirm.
Because I thought it would be nice if we could put it on the parking lot and not take away that water fountain, not take away that grassy area. The back end of it would be, in the front end of it would be right where the fence is. But you look at it and say.
Well, we'll do the design work and we can bring it back to the subcommittee.
Well, what?
Just want to look at the layout where.
No, I mean,
because we will have to do a lot line. I mean,
at some point.
it would be necessary, it would be beneficial, in the context of if you ever want to sell that property, not to have a building sit on the lot line, because you also have the utilities that would then be crossing the property line. There's some work you have to do in the uniform building code to address that, even though we're co-owners. But there's other impacts to police parking and city hall parking. I mean, we've been, actually, lately, there's been a lot of, there's been inadequate parking. I don't know if you experienced that, but.
And I just don't, I hate to get the perception that as soon as you walk out of the restroom, you're looking at the back of the stage, you know, I mean, and then you're gonna have people congregate there to get in to the restrooms, but, you know, it's.
So you think move the entire complex into the plaza parking, the city hall lot.
In the city hall parking lot. But I only said that because I thought that's the way the long line ran. So, however, I just want to back you up.
We have that modular building there, and with that's gone, we've always talked about that would be a perfect spot.
Yeah.
But with those lines, I don't know.
And do we really care? Or are we looking at the good of the city in the future? You know, do we want it cramped or do we want the plaza bigger, you know?
Yeah, it's a pretty, I mean, you see the dimensions, you know, the space where we go fit nicely, but,
Yeah.
you know, if we want to keep the landscaping and all of that, I'm not sure if we'll be able to keep the water fountain there or not. It'll be based on ADA.
Who owns the lot that used to be a building there for the vacant lot where people use it as a parking lot right next to the plaza?
Next to the laundromat.
That's part of
There's more than one
Savannah
this advantage.
Savanovich's property, but she died and that's in some form of a trust.
Right.
And Ron that owns that outpost clothing store supposedly has a 10-year lease on that parking lot and that building with first right of refusal to purchase it. I know where you're going with that conversation.
Well, you know, we talked, the plaza's awful small, and we talked when we had redevelopment about that particular parcel. And it never, of course, the damage was alive and they hated the city. They really did. It goes back before we were.
There's some,
They
they blame the death of this house.
on the fire. It goes way back, but so they were forever talking about so there'd be almost a conversation worthy of having again, because that would be an ideal spot, not only for restaurants, but to expand the whole plaza.
Yeah, I'm sure no matter where we put that restaurant, people are not. It's small, we should have two of them, that should be, you know, but it's.
I think they'll like it if they.
Well, you know, like right now, when my wife and I go down, we have a city hall bathroom to use, you know, so. But I'm not gonna be on the council next year, so then this bathroom to use.
Okay.
Let's move on. David, you.
Okay, well, moving forward with the basketball courts, we did execute the agreement with the state parks for funding basketball courts, and likewise the agreement with Mo Engineering to do the plans and specs for that project is, so that's been kickstarted and will be, you know, following the state kind of process for that, since it's a state funded, largely state funded project through the Catholic grant program.
So what's any kind of timeline?
I think our plans and specs are going to take 8 to 12 weeks, and then, you know, once there's usually a draft review, staff review. Then once that's done, we put them out to bid, usually 30 days, 3 weeks, more. Well, we'll kind of look at the timing and see when the bid period coincides with other holidays and things like that. And then usually there's kind of a review of bids and then we bring to council for award. And it'll be the specs will identify a number of working days. That date is going to take, so we'll have a better schedule once we get the draft specs done. We'll be able to keep the subcommittee updated as our progress on that. So
I'd like to see these things kind of happen, you know, so it seems like this is ever, and I know a lot of steps.
we'll keep we keep meeting, mini milestones.
I know.
Move forward. Next item, I don't really have much to update on American Rescue Plan Act spending plan. We talked a little bit about that. It was more just if
I think that needs to be looked at the budget when we look at the capital improvement plan. I think all that kind of ties together. It's like, it's a funding, what's the best use for that funding and under the current requirements. And there's new requirements that I didn't know about, that I don't think the council should, and they're actually could be favorable. As you and I talked about, David, where we may be able to, pay the city back and actually put that money in a committed fund to be used. We have more latitude on what's important to the community, needed projects. So there won't be as many strings tied to be able to make something happen. So I think looking at the budget and available funding, which the ARPA funding is available funding, what we can do, or what's our options with that, and the capital improvement plan, looking at the grant funding we just received and what's still most important, all that's got to be kind of looked at and out so we can make some decisions.
Well, the only thing with that, we had such a lively discussion on how we're going to use the funds, which brings me to where are we with the project with the school district, where we're going to shovel on the
Well,
ground.
that's approved. Yeah.
Yeah, but where are we with the project? Is it underway? Is it out for bid or what? But that's going to bubble up to the surface again. I think when we combine it there. My thoughts were it was put into, we can put it in the general fund and we should distribute it from the general fund while you and I want an accounting of where that money went. The city doesn't have to report back to the plan on how we use the money.
I'm thinking more of identifying what's available. We've committed some of the money. That money is not no longer available.
We committed all of it.
No. No.
well,
So there was recommendations.
Oh.
The only thing we voted on was the 250,000 for the storm drain.
what council did, Joe, was adopt a resolution that identified the priorities where you would like to see the 2 million spent, $1 million this fiscal year, $1 million this year. So we put it all into one newly established fund. And the plan was to allocate it to those projects.
But what I'm saying is we just received some funding, grant funding, so those projects are not necessarily still projects the ARPA fund is going to be used. That's what I'm saying. We need to revisit that.
Right. I think what I hear you saying, Joe, and based on our conversation, was that one of the uses of ARPA funds was to put a certain amount towards to the water enterprise for help fund the capital improvement project. And so, in the context of the news yesterday about the funding, is can and should we now kind of look at that funding and say, we assume it was a catch match or something else, reality, give council direction. Do you still want it to go to a CIP, or can we look at, other needs in the community, including a street project, for example? So,
Yeah, or maybe a pedestrian safety project if we can't find grant funding from the ASCII road into the city. Is that more important than maybe something else? I don't know how they all fit. That's
Right.
what I'm saying is, we got all these accounts, but we have a lot of restrictions on how money can be used. And can we somehow, so you got higher priorities, but maybe you can't spend any of the money out of these accounts for that priority, even though it's important. There may be an option, we can make some modifications to the ARPA fund where we would have more control over that money to hit that priority. I don't know the answer, I'm just going out of a scenario. You follow what I'm saying?
yeah, I think
It's important that we all understand what we can and can't do with money, because there are a lot of priorities we talked about. Pillsbury Avenue at Cloverdale Boulevard. That's high priority. We had 3 pedestrian injuries, 1 fatality, a major injury. It's a big community concern. We need to do something to how we're going to pay for it. We put in that, and I'm hoping we can get grant funding for all these things. But again, at the end of the day, if we get those, the problem is still there. And then you look at the Aston Road. I mean, when those homes go in, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. When those homes go in, there's going to be problems, and we need to kind of get in front of that. I mean, these kids are going to have to go to school, go to sports, go to the restaurant. They're going to be walking the streets. There's no street lights. At 5 o'clock, it's going to be dark. Coming home from a football game or sports game, they got to get home safely. And so I'm worried about that, and I think it's a high priority. So I mean, all these are high priorities, but we've got to kind of make those tough calls. What's the highest from a safety standpoint today that we need to focus on? And hopefully we can get these shovel ready, and we get for the infrastructure grants. We can get money to do it, and won't take any more. But the reality is we can't bank on that entirely. So that's all I'm saying. So I'm kind of thinking at budget time, I'd like to see us kind of get an overcap of all things with the clear options. So we can really, legal options, I'm talking legal ones, options, what is it we really have the ability to do to try to fix some of these serious things?
Well, could we back up the storm drain on Citrus? I mean, is that out to bid? Where are we with that? Or are we waiting for Citrus to give us?
That's good question, Chair. And it's something we're still coordinating with the school district and outside of healthcare on. We think in terms of the drainage improvements, the recommendation that we put forward was to have the wellness center complete the drainage improvements when they do the site improvement, because that way
You just paid that reimbursement.
we just reimburse them, right? Because we're not. Otherwise, we have to hire an engineer to do bid specs, all of the traditional public
Most cost effective way to go.
process, whereas the wellness California Healthcare can kind of do it as part of their project and submit invoices, and we can reimburse them up to what council authorizes. We are continuing to work with the school district on the plan for that corner, and that'll factor into what the ultimate drainage solution will look like. The school district's interested in acquiring part of that area there for additional parking. So we've been looking at how that can accommodate that and ultimately get that from council under real property negotiation. You want to move forward?
Yes.
Okay. So item 6F is just an update on traffic signal optimization. I executed the agreement with the firm that really is going to take the lead, DC Electric. They're going to work with W-Trans who will prepare the wiring plan, and the DC Electric, who's kind of our standing traffic signal consultant. That does a lot of the work on our signals, will ultimately just perform the work and start this work to provide the yield on yellow or flashing yellow. So that's in process.
That's excellent. That is good. Any timeline on that?
I think in their scope, they identify time off for each other. I'll ask them. Okay, what's their expected timeline? Unfortunately, everybody just seems it takes longer than everyone's so busy. But I'll check. Thank you. Next item is protocol 3. we've made tremendous progress up to the phase 1 project. Hector, his coordination work with fire district and North Snow County Fire funded a phase 2 project just west of Sonoma Drive, so we've got additional kind of vegetation buffer built in there. We've requested and obtained a scope that we're going to put in the budget for phase 3 to do continue with doing more vegetation management work, pretty much in line with what we budgeted this year, right around the 30,000. There's kind of what can we accomplish for about that number, and that'll be to continue doing some same practices that we engaged in with both phase 1 and phase 2. I think so far everybody seems very happy with the work we've done, and we'll just want to continue that until we get very good management position. Let's see, moving forward, again, on traffic signage requests, I kind of collapsed a number of things here. I do want to mention that the no parking signs on East 4th Street, I think Vanessa was up looking at it today, and I did get a text message from Craig. One of the actions that was taken where there was I don't know if there's a street name, but there's the driveway with the houses that come off of East 4th. Right. There was some red curb painted on both the north and south side of that driveway to ensure to protect the vision triangle. I think that was one of the issues, was there was an RV that was kind of parking really close and carrying that vision triangle, and Vanessa kind of identified that what the area was. So there's a newly painted red curb there on. I think the goal was to try to maintain as much parking as possible, because it seems like parking is needed. There's a demand for it in the area, but ensure that vehicles can safely exit, for lack of a better word, the driveway or kind of small street. So that's done. The other items I need to follow up with W Trans. Where we want to request to convert traffic stop sign to a yield sign, and as well as place those stop signs on Champaign, North Jefferson. And you want to take over.
I'm not so sure that it needs it there on North Jefferson and Champaign. I mean, I travel that all the time, coming through Quick Stop, and I always like to watch the kids play ball, and I was coming out on that street. And I mean, it's a congested intersection when school is in session. I should rephrase that, when school is letting out or parents are dropping off. But normal traffic flow, I don't see a problem.
Is that a recommendation? I mean,
Well, I'm not sure why it's been recommended. Is it speeding cars? Is it?
Yeah, it was correspondence in the last packet that was concerning to think about.
I mean, I just, I agree that there's certain intersections that need stop signs, but you don't want one on every corner. Is the same as the letter, Joe?
It just says, we wanted a review conducted at the intersection, change the traffic configuration of curb stage to throughway stop. Says he's witnessed excessive speeding regularly on North Jefferson.
Oh, I think they do get a little heavy there after they leave Daily Park and they head down to School Street. But a lot of the parents have their kids that play slow down signs out there. I don't know, put the stop sign in is actually going to prevent that, or just they can go faster than they can the time they have a stop.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we don't have our speed trailer anymore. We talked a little bit about that. We can actually put it out there and have the ability to clock the speeds. You can see time of day what they're doing, and if there is in fact a speeding problem, that's an easy fix, because the times, and you can have an officer just work that area. One thing I found helpful is, again, going back to the Cloverdale Connect, is alerting community that we received complaints regarding speeding vehicles in certain areas. The chief could do that in his section and let them know, put them on notice that we're going to be doing heavy radar enforcement there. So we wanted to give a heads up, please slow down. And just that thought, if they read it, and then I would suggest that occasionally assign a car out there to do a little bit. They don't have to be heavy-handed. It could be more warnings and just the visibility that might just take care of it. But I would just put something in writing that you're going to be doing this radar enforcement. So you want to give everybody a heads up, slow down, so they're not surprised, and that will definitely get attention. So, but I don't know, I'm kind of in agreement with you. Yes, I don't think we just want to put stop signs. That's not their intended to slow down traffic. People are supposed to obey the traffic laws. And so it gets down to an enforcement issue, not necessarily a stop sign issue. So
what I heard from the subcommittee prior was to continue looking at the yield sign. We had a recommendation, we had some feedback that maybe might not be prudent to yield only because of some of the concerns, pedestrian safety. It sounds like I think that one still needs to be further evaluated. The no parking signs on East 4th Street, I think our goal today was to try to address the immediate issue of visibility of the red curve. So you think it's okay if we'll see how that plays out. And then rather than moving forward with the stop sign, really, or doing a further evaluation, spending time and effort on that, trying to do more of a public outreach.
I think that's really good. And are we getting back to these individuals that requested this, just to let them know what the plan is, that we considered it, we looked at it, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, especially with the direction today.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we're gonna, on the speed, it's a speed issue, not a stop sign issue, and that the police department's aware that we're gonna be conducting further analysis of traffic enforcement, and encourage them to give us the times of day. If there's a certain time of day where there's a continuing pattern of speeding, that information will be helpful to know.
Okay, so moving forward, the update on the repair work, I know that's been kind of identified.
So I was able to ask Craig today while we were out looking at Stone Street to look at the sidewalk and assess whether he thought that sidewalk could be repaired under city staff. So I think he's going to get back to me. I think probably not today. But stay tuned. Anyways, we'll kind of leave it there for now.
That's a good project.
Yeah.
Sidewalk, I don't know, it's enough that it could justifiably come back and says, no, it's too much for us, but again, it's possible. The guys could be able to do that for 2 days.
And so moving forward, an update on the Public Health Vision Zero project. It's queued up for adoption by the board. I'm sure we got adopted yet. I'll double check on that, but that was really just again, kind of what we've been talking about is a campaign to reduce fatalities and address and have a plan to get funding to help address the intersections where there are traffic safety concerns. Update on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, Potter Valley relicensing project, but the last news I heard was that PG&E has agreed to fix the transformer that was broken. That if they fix it, would enable additional transfers of water from the Potter Valley, Eel River Basin to Lake Mendocino. But the project still takes several years to complete. monitor and track that. It kind of seems to be on that project seems to be on slow track. The annual SB1 project, that's of course the 4th Street reconstruction, didn't update on 6F, but this is a good opportunity just to remind you to think about what projects we want to put on the list going forward so that we can use SB1 funds. So with completion of 4th Street, we can start thinking about what are the next priorities. So that'd be a good one to kind of consider maybe as part of the budget process. Moving forward, update on the airport capital improvement program. So we have a deadline of March 31st to submit a 5-year ASIP to the FAA, and our consulting team has been working away on that. We had a meeting last week. That was last week on the status. We talked about projects. There is some additional funding that's coming through the federal government, so we're going to identify some additional work that we wanted to get done to some of the infrastructure out there, particularly the safety lighting and other things. The project that we've been spending most time on has been a infill drainage project. The more challenging issue is not so much the project itself, is how do you address the environmental requirements with putting that drain water back into the earth. What we've been trying to work on that. And one of the major projects is repaving taxiway. Repaving taxiway. So the drainage project and the runway are two major projects. But we're getting ready to submit that to FAA. So we get it in as required. Update on 6 Acres. Had a meeting today with the 6 Acres team. The pre-annexation agreement's all done. We kind of want to know what's the next stage for formal annexation. Whether we need to do an annexation agreement, and my response was, I think it's just contingent upon getting the environmental and the engineering work done for the improvements, and then once that's done, then it would be let's talk about how to bring it forward to council. The pre-annexation agreement, they're not legally required. It's more provides a roadmap on. So that they're in agreement, we're in agreement. Here's all the things we want to see get done to enable the project to annex. And what was critical when it came to council was that there was a funding plan in place to support the extension of water and sewer. We didn't want to be on the hook, but the city, should they annex, to have to fund those improvements. So that's all the pieces that the state's really taking a leadership position, I think, for getting UC Davis and Sac State with professionals involved to kind of help guide the funding program for this design work. So they're hiring a GHB, they're hiring a project manager to oversee and engage with residents to make marketing, development engineer. And so, at the point where they start having design drawings, that's when we'll start to see some of the plans coming for us.
Before you move off that, we done with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Before you move off of that, just a couple things. So the annexation of the vineyard is not part of this annexation. Correct. The Lyles, I know we're going to seek annexation for the vineyard as well.
Right. So our focus right now has been on 6 acres because of the water issues that area affected by their well. In terms of the adjacent property, it's kind of the decision for the property owners whether they want to submit a concurrent application and or bring something forward to council to consider. Because ultimately we're council will be asked to adopt a resolution saying whether you support bringing that area into the city. And so I know for the Lyles, it's a matter of timing.
Right.
And the kind of the issue for the process right now is that the state won't necessarily fund their cost, the cost of annexing the and so it's how do you kind of accomplish goals at the same, and some of that's kind of going to be a decision, kind of this decision for the Lyles, whether they want to wait till it gets annexed, do it after, or do you want to kind of do the work and pay some of the costs to bring it in concurrently.
Well, I guess, as my concerns will be lowered if the residents agree not to object to further annexation of that property. We usually have that in the annexation agreements anyhow. Because someday that's going to be housing. We know that. We've already been knocked on
The vineyard property.
The vineyard property. And we don't want the owners there on Lyle Lane protesting.
Yeah, they will be, if 6 acre property is annexed, they can protest like any ordinary citizen can or object or,
Right.
but they won't have a vote because if the Lyle property is owned by one landowner,
Okay.
they can't necessarily hold it up through a landowner protest. They can say object to it as a citizen, but so it shouldn't weigh in directly. That you get 50% of the landowners here saying we don't want that in. It's more just a traditional planning project. We don't want to see our neighboring property developed.
And do you have any idea what the cost is going to be eventually for the city with this annexation?
So the work that GHG is going to do is going to be to develop the detailed improvement plans, and in theory, the current plan is to have that be fully funded with grants that the state will provide. Where does the city costs really, I think, staff time, and even today, I mean, either Kevin or myself, we attend meetings. If the old issues get raised, we able to see attorney and help us pre-annexation agreement. So I think a lot of the costs are kind of these indirect staff time costs. So there really shouldn't be a direct, city utility cost thing, up until the point when we annex it, and then let's say we accept it and something fails. Well, then we own it. We're going to own that structure. But hopefully, it's new. It's constructed by the it's not. It shouldn't affect our repairs.
Okay. And your time and all that will be charged to the water agency, being the price fund.
Yeah, right now it's done through cost allocation. I don't break it out in addition to.
And then just one last thing, I mentioned at the last subcommittee meeting that whether they're of any value or not, I really think we need to hold on to the water rights for that well. I don't think we should give those up. We don't. I know they're not pumping well today, but who knows if at some point the water agency would let us go in and replace those wells.
Yeah.
So there are already wells in the ground. We're annexing it. We should retain the ownership of that one district in that well. So, my 2 cents. And that's the same with Range Water District and South Cloverdale Water District when they come in.
Right, range water is kind of interesting in the sense that the well, I think, is on on city property.
It's on the airport.
And so I don't quite understand how a district owns, or how we own land, we don't have. And if they talked about, I'm not sure how that came to be.
You're going way back to water rights. I mean,
But I mean, it's something I think we need to explore. Usually if you have wells on your property.
Yeah, wouldn't the burden be on them to show that they have a legal right to be there? I mean, is this something we have to explore?
I think
Can't we just go over and say, hey, this is our well? You prove us wrong.
Yeah, I don't know within the guys at the state and vision drinking water, how that, I don't know how it came to be without some kind of agreement that maybe the well was predated when we accepted the airport. I don't know.
Well, and then at one point, Ricci had the rights to plant some of his vineyard on airport land in turn for leveling that road and taking care of it. So it was kind of like a lot of swap. Bob Perrault did that one with it way back when, but so there's a lot of little stuff down there. And then the county used to own it before we owned it. So who knows?
Yeah, I think it may extend from that. It was a county property and maybe the water service was through this district. The county doesn't really provide water.
Well, I just want to make sure that we try and hang on to the rights to that well. I know a couple of years ago, Linda Hopkins and the Board of Supervisors were talking about consolidating some of the water agencies. There was over 400 water agencies within Sonoma, and they just did not have the financial wherewithal to bring them together as much as possible. So they would love to get rid of the water district, and I'm fine with that as long as we can retain rights and ownership. So, thank you. Sorry.
Oh, I think that's excellent comment. Figure out how to do that. Update on Rule 20. I think the direction from the subcommittee was to put together a proposal on establishing a zone. So we just want to make sure that we do have area that wants to. Is there anything he wants to do to bring it back to some options?
4th Street would be nice, I guess, you know. But you're talking about the undergrounding of utilities.
Right, within the budget that we have available. The good thing is to establish a district that each and each will reallocate those funds somewhere else. We'll have a project kind of formalized on paper.
Is one partner undergrounding?
Yes.
Yeah, they would have to. But maybe, you know, to go back and do something like 4th Street, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a big problem. But if we could get ahead of the development that's coming in on the south side, you know, and partner with Baumgartner to maybe do a section that while he's got the crew out there undergrounding, you know, they can extend what we want done and we reimburse them somehow. But somewhere along that frontage road there, I think should be. So I don't know if, is that Santana or Sandholm? No, that's Sandholm. I don't know if Sandholm is underground where the storage, public storage place is and the cooperage down there, but you know, that would be my south side of town. I mean, all of the boulevard is done in 2nd Street where we're going to redo that sidewalk and that blacktop. That's all done.
Part of it is, but the part isn't unless you get Main Street. That's not underground. But it is all the way up to there where the ambulance and
Yeah, that's underground.
there are a couple of holes at that end. So it went up to a point where I think you'll see. I'll go by it again today, but I'm pretty sure.
You'll exactly.
Yeah, there's a couple of holes there that are
I mean, because we can identify a small project that, I mean, with other cities, that's what they do, tear down, even if they got a couple holes, not a piece.
Well, there's a couple of holes, but it's down towards Main Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you locked into that, David, once you do that, or can you say, okay, we'll change our mind?
No, I don't think they're locked in. I mean, we had established the district by ordinance. That's a fairly simple ordinance. And we can actually establish multiple zones. And we have, I think we could say it's only 1, 2, 3. I mean, we identify what the areas are. I think the goal is, don't do the effort just to do it, but to actually do something to accomplish. And cities are doing it just, even if it was a couple of poles, well, get them underground.
Well, it would finish that street.
Yeah.
I mean, it's underground up to the end of the street there, and then I saw holes with the line going across, so that might be just to finish that up. Maybe enough money to do that project and then clean that up.
I can agree with that. Maybe we could do multiples.
Well, we can come back to it, so maybe a list and say, okay, here's the 1, 2, 3 overlay that bring council. Or it seems like what happens, we bring to council and or says, well, we have visions of grandeur and then.
And everybody has to weigh into the conversation. Joe and I are making that decision now.
It's easy enough. Let's just do it.
Let's just do it.
Well, I think putting some criteria on paper too might help. Identify a project that's accomplishable, reasonable.
Well, that's a fit within the budget. We have 800, what is it, 875,000. That's a lot, but it really isn't when you start tearing streets up and taking it down. So, I mean, realistically, what can we do with the budget?
Right. We'll see update on First Street Carpet Bridge. I know that it's still a design phase. There is a request from the county to for a right-of-way dedication. The request, that the response was from the city, from me, was we'd be happy to bring it forward for consideration, so long as we as a city reserve the right for any underground infrastructure. And the response was, well, you can dedicate to us and apply for an encroachment permit. And we're still working on resolving that. Because I just felt like we have a very collaborative relationship. That may not always be the case. Not that an encroachment permit is a big deal, but
We don't want to have to beg for it later.
right. And so, and our Myers Navi said, yeah, we can just include in the dedication of reserving us right to future infrastructure underground, and it would be very simple. Actually, that's how it's modeled to return to the right time. But prepare that language and give it to the county. So we support the idea of the bridge. We know you need some additional area for the footings.
Just sign here.
But we just want to make sure the city's interests are protected, because that's where our water infrastructure comes in. So. And update on broadband, no new updates there. We are continuing to experience internet problems at our courtyard. So I did talk to Comcast in the fall this time for that proposal.
That is on one of the infrastructure grants, available broadband. So that's the one on it. Look at that if you could.
I think that was on the stimulus money. Wasn't it?
It's on the money, the 1.2 trillion, but broadband is one of the big areas that we have. And again, we may be able to do more than just fix this little problem, fix the problems about the city. So I don't know. Again, money's out there. We know it's dedicated with this purpose. Whether we get it, I don't know, but we won't get it if we don't go after it. I do know that. That's for sure. So I mean, again, we're time sensitive. So do take a look at that, because that is one of the categories identified. I don't know how much they have towards that. Anyway, their webinar on broadband is going to be Thursday, March 24th. So they'll go over what's available, what qualifies, what we need to do.
So with that being said, is there anything else?
I did have one question I had asked, if we reach out to Caltrans to figure out what generated the need for stop on the overpass.
Where is the stop sign? On which overpass?
It's on the south crossing, and it's on the westbound lane. The stop sign and striking is immediately before the off ramp heading in the northbound lane. So if you got an off-speed, for example, and you're coming up on that on ramp, and if you wanted to get on the on ramp, you have to stop. Or off ramp.
Yeah, if you want to get on the freeway, you stop. If you're coming off possibly you come into town,
You stop.
you stop at where the northbound on ramp is. There's a stop sign.
On South Cloverdale Boulevard. South Cloverdale
It's on
Boulevard.
the overpass, the off over ramp. So
I think I noticed it on my way in today. I took the South Cloverdale. Well, because I have to stop getting off of the
freeway,
freeway.
but the
And
cars
I
coming.
did notice that there was
Yeah.
a stopped vehicle so that I could go.
Yeah, it's weird.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they just appeared. They didn't talk to anybody, and a lot of people were kind of upset. Why, here's another set of bad stop signs, why are they there? And some people pointed out that wasn't the city, that was Caltrans. But it seemed odd that they would do that without talking to the city, at least what would generate them to do that? It's really bizarre, and I'm just curious what their criteria, just stuff.
Because there really was no problem there. The only thing I could think of is they own the stop sign down by Starbucks. And maybe if they were getting a lot of complaints, they might have gotten mixed up or. I
don't know, it's weird.
It's counter.
Yeah, it's very different.
I just had a couple questions. The scout cabin, how are we coming along with moving that door over there?
We hadn't actually fully entertained that idea.
Oh, okay.
Franco, we can certainly
No,
talk about it.
whatever you do. Franco's building, we're still using that, even though.
Yeah, our lease actually is due up at the end of June. So we actually just looking at that today. That space, it's got 3 internal offices, one for the city engineer, one for the public works director, and one for our engineering tech position, and then our building inspector. So our inspector still uses it sort of daily. Periodically, that's anything pop in there. That's just here. We kind of tied to this is in anticipation of removing the city engineer requirement from the position, I had the position analyzed by RGS to give the recommendation on the salary. And I'm going to bring that forward so that we can then, assuming there's support for it, remove the requirement for city engineer and just retitle it for works director, and then be able to put that out to for re-advertise with the new salary. And then if we've got applicants, we'd be able to fill that space. So the question really is, do we keep that space? And right now, my feeling is we should, if we anticipate being as work director, because that's where they would likely have this, space that would accommodate that person, along with hopefully. It's a really hard time to bring staff on, but we need to fill that.
So right now you're looking to keep it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. But you know, there are other options. You know, if, for instance, if bringing us public works director on board and refurbishing the office out of the courtyard, I looked at that. It's a pretty nice office. And you know, that's legitimately probably where a public works director should be. The challenge is they really do need to get access to all of our files and everything like that, and everybody out there does not have access to our server. That's why I'm kind of trying to figure that out. But I mean, there's workarounds. So you know, that's another way to accommodate. You know, moving the director out there, maybe bring the engineering tech to fill it in out and then back in the city hall, and then we'll have to figure out what we do for the building inspector space. You know, it gets back to kind of maybe looking at that upstairs space, which is, it's not ideal. Those kind of set standard. So you have that, I'm sure.
It's the old engineering trailer, I'll tell you what.
Well, I just asked for no particular reason, just kind of curious, but is there anyone from City College who can move out there to use that space and maybe free up a little more space internally?
Well,
I know it's nice to have everybody right there.
yeah, I mean, there's a certain convenience to having everybody together. I don't know if there's anybody itching to move. You know, Myra she's been doing a really great job with getting, you know, all the, you know, she kind of retired and she's back helping us and she's been doing the records, especially on our maps and everything that working on. Helping the cemetery stuff. Always something going on there. But you know, I'm anticipating it's kind of a temporary position. So I don't think it's hard to say.
Well, speaking of records and getting things in order, I was talking to Myra, and for some reason, the minutes of the city council that are handwritten that were in that council office are down at the courtyard instead of over at the history center.
Yeah,
And we paid them, I think it was $12,000 to do an extension into that parking area to house some of their stuff, make room in the fireproof cabinet for our records. And I don't know where that is.
well, I know we worked with them on an agreement to retain the records.
Right.
And it was a little challenging to get them for our requirements. But I'll revisit that maybe with Dr. Marissa and see if we can. Because it'd be better suited in the issue center.
And we went over and measured, and Joaquin even went down to Santa Rosa to buy some special shells and cubes and all. And then, of course, Marge Gray left and everything fell by the wayside. But, and that's not high priority for me. I just wanted to, you know, I'm always concerned about those hand records being down there in an temporary, what do they say? It's temperature controlled, it's fireproof. We could lose some of those old records. Not that you can read them, but people have sloppy handwriting. But
I think, Jerry, to your point, you know, Mark is kind of the go-to on that, and was the person we were working with when she left. Yeah, from the senior center, or for the from the history center, kind of fell off.
what do you need my help on that one? Anything go to the order, future agenda items? Then why don't we go ahead and adjourn the meeting to April the 19th at 1:30.
Meeting adjourned at 4:50.
Thank you, sir. So I pulled up this. I got it. That one right there. I push it and then change the colors.
Yeah, you gotta type your name in there.
I did that already.
Oh, yeah, and then just pick the dates that you are available.
If I leave it blank,
Yeah, if you leave it blank, then you're not available.
I'm available Wednesday. I'm sorry, yeah, Wednesday.
Yeah, but again, I see the check, see the little check box there.
Mhm. Okay, I'm not available this day, so just leave it alone.
Let's see, there's 3 more pages, so go scroll in. With that little arrow there.
Two more.